Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. John DeLynn. The date is, Carah, what's the date?
The 26th is the day after Christmas.
26th.
Did you forget?
Carah.
Whoa.
Merry day after Christmas. How are you?
The eggnog gave you a brain fog.
I know. We're trying to do too many things at once. Anyway, it's December 26th, 2021, day after Christmas. And we are super excited for today's special guest. He is kind of semi-internet famous, but before we introduce him, Carah, how was Christmas?
It was great. My kids all got along, and that's a Christmas miracle in and of itself.
That's a Christmas miracle?
I have 3 children, and they are kind of hellions. And on Christmas, they were perfect angels because they got all their presents and they played nicely. So how's your Christmas, John?
Super great. Yeah. Lots of kids around.
You got a new shirt?
And got a new shirt. And you got a Christmas vest or something.
John walked in with a vest, and I said, only one of us can be wearing a vest today. It's me.
So I took my vest off, and Carah's wearing a Christmas vest.
Yeah, that's how I run at Mormon Stories. I just we dictate all the times that we're starting, the guests, and everything down to the vests. Guests and vests. That's my department.
I love it. All right. Well, it's between Christmas and New Year's, and we should be enjoying our families, but instead we have someone who's kind of internet famous with us today. His name is Austin Archer. Austin, welcome to Mormon Stories Podcast.
Oh my God. I can't believe I'm here. This is crazy. This is wild.
Yeah. And just in the few minutes we've been talking, we have more connections than I thought. And that's very Mormon, but a lot of people know you and are crazy about your TikTok channel and your content. And then there's probably going to be some people that don't. So how would you introduce yourself just so that people can know kind of who you are and what you do? And then we'll obviously jump into your story.
Yeah, I'm an actor and singer-songwriter and just kind of general overall creative guy. Got a podcast called People Pleaser with Austin Archer. And I just started doing content during the pandemic more. I was always making videos on the internet, but the pandemic, I decided I'm going to do it, really ramp it up because I was at home furloughed from my job. And it became my full-time gig. So that's what I do. You can find me at yourpal_Austin on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok, and check out what I'm doing. So,
and what type of content do you create on those channels?
Yeah, you know, they always tell you that you got to have a niche, you got to have a brand and stick to it. And my brand is kind of all over the place. So sometimes it's direct address, me talking about an idea that I like. Sometimes it's me doing skits. Sometimes it's music videos where I do original songs and I'm dancing and wearing different outfits and having cool lighting. And so I kind of run the gamut on my channel. Sometimes it's really serious and I'm like really, really honest and vulnerable and off the cuff. Sometimes it's me, you know, I don't really have like the niche. There's a lot of channels on TikTok where it's like, this guy does this. And I think people mostly know me because of the songs, probably, though. Yeah.
Yeah, like turtleneck and blazer.
Let's let him sing 'em.
On point like a laser.
Yeah. I like when John sings it.
Oh, I actually love it more. You're right.
Hey.
I didn't hear it in my headphones. Quite.
Uh-huh.
I'm your boss, so you have to be nice.
I actually did like it a lot. Yeah. And then you have quite a viral song. I think it's gone viral. Like I've seen it multiple times. The one about like pronouns.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
That's like a trending sound too.
You know, I think sometimes you find stuff that everyone knows they can repurpose because the line in the song is congratulations. That was one of the stupidest things that I've ever seen anybody post on the internet before. It goes, congratulations. That was one of the stupidest things that I've ever seen anybody post on the internet before. And I think that line right there is just very repurposable. People can like, you know, someone makes a stupid comment on a Twitter thread and they drop that one in there. Yeah. Boom. So yeah, it's very memeable.
Yeah. As somebody who has to deal with a lot of trolls and people saying dumb things to me on the internet, you know, you're just looking for favoriting sounds of like, next time I get a dumb comment, I'm going to throw that up, reply to comment with just that song.
Yeah.
So good. And it's well produced too.
Oh, thank you. You know, that's kind of the key is like, if I want people to know that I make real music and they can find my actual albums on Spotify and Apple Music, the fake fun songs that I make on TikTok also have to sound like good music. So people go like, this is actually a good song. And it's like, well, that's because I actually do that. So you can.
Okay. So you actually have albums on Spotify as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So we need to include all that.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And then one thing that's interesting about you, so you've got your own Mormon story that we're going to dive into,
Mhm.
but a lot of so you've got like how many followers just on TikTok? Not to embarrass you.
It's 955,000, something like that.
So like almost 1 million followers.
Yeah.
Carah, I don't think we've ever had someone with that following. Have we on Mormon Stories?
No, maybe not.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm scanning
so
my brain now.
But I would say the majority of your followers have no idea that you were ever Mormon. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, sure. They find out all the time. Like I'll be doing live streams all the time, and people will ask because they hear that I'm from Utah, and so they find out in little bits. Yeah.
And I had 1 or 2 listeners reach out to me and say, "Whoa, this dude Austin is a ex-Mormon. You should get him on." So shout out to those listeners and viewers, because we wouldn't have been able to do this without you. Sorry, I don't have your name handy, but thanks.
And the content's not specifically ex-Mormon content too, so it's like a lot. I don't talk about it a lot, so but
it's not even super about religion per se.
Not really. It comes up very sparingly in what I talk about, but yeah.
But today, so we asked you to kind of just do an outline, because I don't know anything about your personal life other than now I know that you are brothers with Adam Archer, who was the successor to John Larson's Mormon Expression podcast for a season. That's a fun. So shout out to Adam. Hey, Adam.
Hey, Adam.
But other than that, it was really powerful to read your outline and just to give people a preview of what we're going to talk about today. It's not just about being super famous. It's also you were raised Mormon. At some point you left the church, not to give away the ending, but then as a post-Mormon, this is in the thumbnail, so we're not giving too much away. As a post-Mormon, you experimented with alcohol, and it was moving for me to just read in the outline that you actually became an alcoholic and went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you became sober, and you're how many years sober now?
3.5 years sober.
That's a freaking huge accomplishment. So we've talked about that before on Mormon Stories, but never with the high quality audio, the high quality video, and never in such a intimate way. So it's a topic we've covered, but never like we're going to cover it today. And I know that's something post-Mormons need to guard against, maybe having that happen to them. And then there's going to be post-Mormons who have had that happen to them. And
we don't have a good education on it. We don't know what it's all about. We don't know what we're doing. We just go out there and we just start drinking.
So maybe we'll talk about pitfalls, how that can happen, how to avoid that happening. And then if it does happen, how one person found their way through all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to talk about that.
Carah, anything else?
Yeah, and then anyone who's watching on YouTube or Facebook also has stars, but YouTube's probably the best way if you're tuning in right now. And there's a little button at the bottom with the $sign on it. That's the super chat button. So I will incorporate as many comments and questions that you have for Austin throughout this live stream. And then if you want to donate money to the podcast, a great way to do that. We're actually labeled as a nonprofit on YouTube now. So YouTube doesn't take any cut of your super chats anymore, I believe. Yeah. So if
I got to get on that.
Yeah. Start a nonprofit. So if you want to put in some money into the super chat, that will help us see your comment, highlight it. And we just appreciate everyone for tuning in. We kind of did this live stream spur of the moment, but we figured day after Christmas, you're just digesting leftovers and just want to tune into a really fun live stream. So join us, everybody. It's going to be really fun. I'm excited. So excited, Austin, you're in town and we got to do this. So
yeah,
get on it.
Yeah. And I guess if we want to give a rating, we'll give this one a PG-13 rating. We don't expect any super hardcore stuff, but there may be a swear word here and there. And so
I like the word frig. So maybe I'll just say frig.
Frig.
Yeah.
Ow, my friggin' ears.
Yeah.
No, we're okay with people just communicating how they're comfortable. We just we like informed consent. So we want our audience to know. So
absolutely
nothing hardcore today. No expected John Larson F-bomb rants that we know of. But
nobody can out F-bomb my Mormon Stories interview, though. I was like up to 40 on that one.
Yeah. So we're going for a PG-13. It should be safe for all viewers and even mature children. So, all right.
All righty.
All right. So, Austin Archer, where does your Mormon story begin?
Sandy, Utah.
Sandy.
Yeah. I was born in a house that I was in till I was about 5 or 6 years old, but then we moved to this house where I was raised and that's kind of my childhood, but it was in the Willow Creek area, Willow Creek Country Club, that whole area. We were the Willow Creek 4th Ward. And
is that where Boy K. Packer used to live? Is that up?
Geez, I don't know. I maybe. I don't know though.
What are the coordinates?
It's like
super east, right?
Yeah, and we had like the runoff from Little Cottonwood Canyon coming back through our backyard, like the creek was coming through our backyard. I think
that's where both Boyd K. Packer kind of raised his family, and also where Grant Palmer lived. Does that name mean anything?
Yeah, Grant Palmer. He was in our ward.
Oh, okay. So when I interviewed Grant Palmer, I went to his house and I interviewed him in Willow Creek, so I know just the area.
Yeah, I remember growing up, that was a big thing. It was like
in your ward.
Everyone was like really talking about Grant Palmer and like this big. I remember as a kid being like, "What did he do?" And they were just like, "He wrote a book. You can't write books like that."
Okay, I want to cover that in your timeline. It's true. I want to cover that in your timeline.
Yeah.
So okay, Willow Creek.
So Willow Creek, and I loved being Mormon. I loved growing up LDS. It's the only thing I really knew. It was. You grow up in Utah, and as your audience is well aware, it's just sort of, you don't have a frame of reference outside of that. So all of my friends were LDS. I talk about this all the time. We talked a little bit about AA, but it's like I talk about this all the time in AA meetings that I'm like, nobody in my neighborhood drank alcohol. Everyone in my neighborhood was Mormon. Everybody's parents were Mormon. Everybody's aunts and uncles were Mormon. Everybody's cousins were Mormon. So like, it just wasn't a thing. And then if someone was having a problem with it, if there was someone's teenage kid who was doing it, it was everyone knew about it, that so-and-so's teenager got caught drinking beer or something, but I loved being LDS, and I had a bunch of good LDS friends, and yeah.
How many siblings?
3 older siblings. I'm the youngest. And
4? Youngest of 4?
Yeah.
Were your parents kind of pioneer stock? And
yeah, we had ancestors in the Martin handcart company and stuff like that, and people it goes back. We're not first generation. It went back deep. Grandparents were LDS and their parents were, and so
is there anything you are comfortable sharing about like what type of Mormon home you grew up in? Because there's probably shades of orthodoxy.
Sure. I can tell you this, we went to church every week, and I went to Mutual and Young Men's and all that stuff. But all my friends grew up in homes where they couldn't watch The Simpsons and they couldn't watch PG-13 movies without permission, and R was off the table. And like, I tell this to my parents all the time. I'm like, you shouldn't be surprised that I talk the way I talk and that I have some of the views that I have, because you guys let me watch anything. Like and it's just because I showed a very strong affinity from a young age that I wanted to be an actor, and that I wanted to make movies, and that I wanted to do that with my life. And so anytime my parents saw a good movie that was rated R, that had really good acting or really good writing in it, they'd be like, "We're going to show you this movie, but just because we want you to watch the actors in this movie, we want you to." So like, I remember seeing Good Will Hunting in the theaters, and my mom was like, "You just got to see the acting in this movie." And that movie's like, I don't think there's a line in the movie that doesn't have the F word in it. Yeah. I was like 8 years old, but I loved it. I just was blown away by it.
That is one of my favorite movies of all time. Robin Williams, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
Brilliant script. Didn't they win the Academy Award?
Oh yeah,
screenplay?
Best original screenplay. And
it's got to be one of Robin Williams' best,
one of his greatest. It's one of his most subdued. It's one of his only times where he does a role without launching into, not that I don't like the Robin Williams ness of it all, the impressions, the John Wayne, but he really is just a guy. He's just this kind of sad guy, and he's
not on some type of weird character.
It feels like he's actually being like himself, who he would really be if you actually got to meet him and sit down with him.
He had a dark side, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. You know. Yeah.
So what were some of your early creative inspirations that made you think that you might want to be an actor or a media personality as a kid?
Yeah, it's so weird.
Where'd you get that idea?
I'd say this all the time, that I feel incredibly lucky that I've always known what I wanted to do with my life. I think that it's really hard for people to get into adulthood or early adulthood. And even there's people who are in their 30s and 40s and even 50s who are like, I don't know if I ever figured out what I like most. What's the thing that makes me me? What's the thing that makes me feel like I have purpose, that makes me feel like I'm here? I've always felt from a very young age like I knew what I wanted. And I was obsessed as a first or second grader with Monet and Van Gogh and like these these Romantics painters and these Impressionists, and I loved the story of Van Gogh, which is weird for like a 7-8-year-old to be obsessed with. He's like the quintessential tortured artist.
Was it Don McLean's song "Starry Starry Night" that got you into?
I love that song, but it was more just I had this art book that was about him that would tell you his story and talk about his depression and I was like, this guy gave his entire heart to what he was doing. And what's so impressive, I think, and that I keep appreciating more as I get older, is that he was able to transfer pain into really bright and beautiful images. His paintings weren't paintings of despair. They don't look like, outside of a few maybe,
they don't look as tortured.
They don't look like that.
Yeah.
But what he is doing is he's painting with broken brushes that are frayed at the ends, and with materials that created that really thick stroke on the page so that the oil's sort of raised off of the page and everything looks messy and he can't get the image very fine. And I don't even know if that was his methodology of expressing what was going on inside, or if it was just, I can't afford better instruments than this. This is the best I have, is these brushes that are all broken. And that says something too about what he's working with. And the best I can get, the closest I can get it, is these broad strokes that are really messy. But he's always trying to bring a ton of color to the palette. And I think he wants the person looking at it to feel good when they look at it, which is really interesting because he so rarely felt good, you know.
Yeah.
But I think he did feel good when he was painting. I think that when he was painting, he felt like he was attached to his purpose and like he was in a state of flow and he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. And so that's why I say I feel really lucky to have always known that, because there's never been a question of what I want to do with my life and what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I don't have to really worry about that. I have people ask me all the time, do you think you should do something else that makes more money? And I say, sure, but I'm not gonna, because this is what it's always been. So
I relate to that.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of young to be really focusing on a sophisticated artist like Van Gogh is like second grade. So tell us more. I want to hear more about your creative influences.
Oh man, my parents were so supportive.
What was their career, your parents?
My dad is he ran a really successful office supply business where they sold copiers and fax machines and things like that. They were a supplier for people who needed to fill their office space with computers and office supply equipment and stuff like that. And he built that from the ground up with a few partners and built it into it was one of the most, it was like them and Les Olson Company that were like the two people selling everybody their copiers and printers and stuff like that. And he was able to build it up and sell it for a good amount and did well with that. And my mom was a teacher. She was a substitute teacher, and she would sub at my high school a lot when I was in high school. And she would also, the thing that my mom did is she was like the costume designer for every play that I was ever in. And she was always like when I was a kid, she would be the music director for the plays that I would do and stuff like that. And she was very involved in what I was doing. She was kind of the consummate stage mom. She was taking me to all my auditions, and she was always there and involved and getting in people's ear when I'd be on set shooting something. She'd be letting them know, like, I don't think he's comfortable on his knees. Like, she was not standing back and letting me do it. She was always really involved. Yeah.
So what were some of your early performances, productions?
I think the first play I ever did, I did a production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat with my mom.
Who are you?
I was in the ensemble. They have the children's choir. They have the children's choir that sings along with everything. And I did that at like 5 or 6 years old. And I think I told my mom, this is what I want to do. And then I went to my mom when I was 9 or 10. I'd found an agency in town that was booking kids on commercials and stuff like that. And I said, I want to do commercials. And I said, I wrote these people a letter, and they said they want to meet me. And my mom goes, you wrote these people a letter? And I said, yeah. And they want to meet me. And so we went in for an appointment. And at the time, this was like the second year that they were in operation. It's a place called Talent Management Group. They're now like the biggest talent agency in the state of Utah, but this was like their second year. I've been with them the whole time. And so they just recently celebrated 25 years, and I've been with them for 23 of those years. And like, it's weird being with them for that long, but.
So you had an agent since what age?
Since 9 or 10. And
What
we started
Who was an agent at 9 or 10?
Yeah. we started doing commercials and stuff, and Touched by an Angel was a big TV show in town, and I'd go do Touched by an Angel, or Everwood came to town. I did an episode of Everwood, and so.
Whoa. So you were having artistic credits that would put you on IMDb by age 8 or 9.
Yeah, I was making money too. I was doing like shows that I was making money at, and all my friends, I was doing commercials and things like that. And so, when I wanted big presents for Christmas, my parents would usually go, "You have money for that. Do you want to like maybe split the cost of it with us?" Like, and I think what they were trying to teach me is like, well, let's see, like how you've got money. Do you want to try to buy stuff? Is it worth it for you to put money into this? And it kind of taught me when I should save and what's worth investing into and things like that. And, but I was always doing plays. I pretty much have been in a play at least one play every year of my life until the pandemic happened. This is the longest period of my life that I haven't been on stage, and it's really weird.
So as a kid, were you ever like a lead or a leadish role? Did you ever do Hale Theater?
No, I always wanted to be. I would go and audition for big roles that had, like I auditioned for. No, not at Hale. I auditioned for Gavroche in the touring company of Les Mis when I was a kid, and I didn't get it, and it devastated me.
The touring company.
Yeah, for the Broadway touring company, and I was the wrong size for the costume. And for kids, they have to have you be in this right window for they're like, we have 5 of them, and they all need to fit the costume. And if you're not the right dimensions, at least that's what they told me. And maybe I just wasn't good enough to. I loved acting from a young age, but I wasn't good at it probably till I was 20, but I really liked it. And I think as far as like teenage actors go, when I was in high school, I was maybe one of the better kids in my department just because I'd been doing it for so long, And so I had some of the foundational technical understanding of how to do it and stuff. But I've just had a lifelong love affair with musicals and musical theater and all that stuff. So I started getting leading roles when I was a teenager. And then when I was in high school, I was kind of the lead in every single show we did. So yeah.
Nice. I like that main character vibe that you're always in the center. And then you download this TikTok app.
Yeah. I think people that went to high school with me are not surprised at all
right.
that I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I think they're like, yeah, that makes sense. So.
Right.
So, so I guess I don't want to leave your childhood. I want to hear about a lot of your roles, because I'm in the theater a lot, your favorite shows and all that and things you started in, but anything else about your childhood that you really want to mention?
It was just kind of that. It was I was obsessed with art. I think I'm such a youngest child. Like my mom gave me an entire drawer in our kitchen that was a big drawer, like a big, like bay drawer where you would normally put like big bowls and stuff like that. She devoted that entire drawer to my art supplies, it was just full of sketchbooks, full of my drawings and full of my paintings and stuff and all of my supplies. And I don't think any other of the siblings got their own drawer in the house that was just devoted to their craft. And I'm like such a youngest child in that way, where they're like, we'll let you have your own dedicated drawer with all of your things. And, but yeah, it was just I was always, I got my first camera when I was like 12 or 13, video camera. And me and my friends were making movies nonstop, just making.
Were these tape or digital?
It was like when mini DV was first a thing. And so it was a digital it was like digital tape where it was still tape, but it was like the transition to digital. And we would make stop motion animation movies with our action figures and all kinds of stuff. And I was never not involved in some kind of creative thing.
So when we think about your life kind of before age 12, your Mormon life before age 12, anything else you want to share? Like, did you like primary songs? Did you like primary? Do you have fond memories of like your experiences as a Mormon as a child?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of great little milestones in there that you look forward to. You look forward to getting that first CTR ring, like whenever it's going to be that one of your teachers gives it to you, or I can't remember how you get it, but either it's gifted to you by parents or like a teacher like hands out. See, there's just I enjoyed performing on stage for Mother's Day and for Christmas with the primary choir and stuff like that. And I enjoyed, what I loved growing up was I loved speaking in church, even as a really young kid. And it's because It's because I'm a talker, and I saw other kids who would do the thing where they, their parents wrote their talk, or they would come up and they would read out of the ensign, and they'd say like, in the latest general conference, President Hinckley said the blah, blah, blah. I really liked getting up there and having something to say. I really wanted to go up and like write my own talk and kind of wow the people in the congregation with, I was going to be a preacher. When I was growing up, I was going to be the world's best missionary. I was going to be Elder Price, and change the world with the way that I sold the gospel and the way that I came at it. I was always trying to find an angle.
That was a Book of Mormon musical reference, by the way.
Yeah. Something incredible. I'll do something incredible.
I want to be the Mormon who changed all of mankind.
Exactly.
My best friend.
Yeah, exactly. But that was me. And I loved speaking in church. And I also loved that, like, I would do it, and then adults would come up afterward and they'd go like, did you write that? And I'd go, yeah, I wrote that myself, And
why are you nodding, Carah?
We have the same life, because I was like always trying to attack it from a different angle. Like, I'm going to outsmart all these other dumb bitches over here in the primary program whose parents or the primary president wrote theirs. I'm going to take my own scratch of paper. I'm going to write this. People are going to see, like, no, it wasn't some adult who did this. This was all I needed.
So, Carah,
I'm special.
Yeah.
The little I know about your childhood, it feels like you're vibing a lot with what Austin's talking about. Like,
I've always known what I wanted to do. And I think I don't want to get all like feministy on anyone or anything, but I think I was just like, I could do all of those things, or I could just be a mom. That sounds easy. I'll just do that one. Nobody look at me. I'm fine. I'll be in the corner over here being a nice stay-at-home mom.
I think that's the experience that most of the women that I was doing it with growing up, though, all the girls that like I was doing plays with and stuff, especially the ones that were really, really good at it, that I would be like, you need to do this.
Yeah.
They would say, they'd be like, yeah, maybe, or like, I might just get married. And I'd be like, oh, that bums me out. Like, you should do it. But also the industry is hard for everyone, and it's extra hard on women.
Exactly.
And it's extra hard on like white women, and just being, going out there and trying to be another ingenue. And
yeah. Like, that sounds hard and rewarding.
Yeah.
And at least I could make my own path, and like my pitfalls and my successes could be like something I chose. But it wasn't until I started doing TikTok and Mormon stories here in this last year, I was like, oh yeah, I've absolutely known I wanted to do all this since I was in kindergarten. That like, I wanted to say something. I wanted to make people laugh.
Yeah.
I just kind of stuffed it down.
Yeah. I should walk that. I said white women, and it's like, not that I'm like white women are the most oppressed, like not at all.
Sorry.
No, it's just that it's the amount of competition actually that exists in the industry for women when they're going out. It's just like, especially early on, it's just like, and I think a lot of guys, at least when I was younger too, it was like, if you're any good at all, you're the lead, and then the women would be like all really good, and it would be really competitive, and there's only like one good part in the show for them, but there's like 4 really good lead guy roles. And if you're even competent at all, if you're just willing to be in the play, you've got a shot to be the lead.
There's nothing more depressing than being a girl who loves to act, but you can't sing growing up. And what I think, Austin, what you're trying to say is like, this is a dime a dozen. Just being like a white girl in Utah who wants to be in plays. Yeah. We got a whole truck full of them.
Yeah. And also who's doing plays in Utah when you're growing up? Like, nobody's doing straight plays. It's musicals. So if you're not a dancer singer and you just want to be an actor, it's like, well, back to the ensemble with you.
I mentioned Hale Theater. Like, for those of you who don't know or haven't been to Utah, there's this thing called the Hale Musical Theater, which there's one in, Sandy, right, Draper area. Yeah. There's one in Orem, but I don't know if it's Broadway quality theater, but it's super close. It's
like one of the most state-of-the-art spaces in the country. Yeah. It is one of the most top-notch facilities in the country, which is also why I have a personal beef with it, but we don't need to go into that because.
Oh, well, let's get into that in the end.
Yeah, sure. We can. Yeah.
I guess I want to throw a bone. Sometimes some people might feel like we're a little bit hard on the church here on Mormon Stories. Yeah. I want to throw the church a bone. If you, there was a PBS documentary called The Mormons, came out 10 or 15 years ago. And one of the things it talked about is how Brigham Young loved like singing and dancing and how he really encouraged that. And I just want, my mom, people may not know this. This is a shout out to my mom. And there's a Mormon Stories episode about my mom that maybe we can include in the show notes. But my mom was always putting on a musical. My entire upbringing growing up, because she grew up in Franklin, Preston, Idaho. and she learned to love music and acting and theater. And so
Yeah.
that was so much they put on Saturday's Warrior when I was a kid growing up. Like the theater, I think Mormonism has done a good job of encouraging the performing arts. And that's why So You Think You Can Dance and The Voice and American Idol, isn't it kind of why there have been so many Mormons in
BYU
so many of those
turns
shows?
out Broadway talent.
Yeah.
And they turn out people that go and work on Broadway all the time. BYU is a little Broadway factory. Like BYU and just Mormons in general turn out really good showbiz people who are really talented, and like it's a big thing here. And so yeah, I mean, I grew up, we had an intercom system that went through our entire house that you could play music and it would go to every speaker in every room in the house. And we would have on Saturdays, we would clean the house and everyone had chores, like you're assigned to the bathroom or whatever. And my parents would blast Les Mis or Miss Saigon or Cats, or like they would blast these cast albums through the house, The Secret Garden. And we would just listen. So we grew up listening to these musicals, and yeah.
So
you're like the 21st century version of that. My family did the exact same thing, but we had a player piano. So we were like living at turn of the century. And it was like this old timey music. The same thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's fair to give a shout out to Mormonism that it's done a good job encouraging performing arts.
Mm-hmm.
True.
I say that Utah County I mean, when I was coming up in Salt Lake, being an actor and a musician and stuff, I was living in punk houses and stuff. But the people who were doing it down in Utah County and the Mormon people, they were really serious about it. And I think maybe part of that is because there's not a lot of like drugs or things that get in the way of their productivity. But the Utah County bands, you have, really popular bands like you've talked to Tyler Glenn, Neon Trees, and like The Used came out of Utah County, and then like Brandon Flowers from Nephi, Utah,
Totally.
like,
and Imagine Dragons.
Yeah. You know, and they're really,
they're Vegas, but they're Mormon.
And they take it really seriously.
Yeah.
Actually
Wayne Sermon is from American Fork. What is the Cavemen? Is that it's a high school, the Cavemen down anyway.
Oh geez, I don't know.
I think it's American Fork High
Timpanogos?
Anyway, plenty of
American Fork is the Cavemen? Is that what you're trying to say?
one of those.
There is a high school that is the Cavemen.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Right. I think it's American Fork. Anyway.
Yeah, there's something about Mormonism that
Imagine Dragons, Neon Trees, The Killers, so many. Yeah. I also just want to add, Carah, if you'll add this to the show notes. Listeners, after you watch this amazing interview, one of the top 10 best interviews of all time of Mormon Stories is an interview with Clark Johnson. Clark Johnson, speaking of the Book of Mormon musical, was in the original cast of the Book of Mormon musical.
I've seen this interview.
And
it's fantastic.
It's one of my favorites.
Fantastic.
So it's a great example of what we're talking about.
Ironically enough, Trey Parker and Matt Stone and Richard Rodriguez, or is that his name?
Like that.
They wrote the music. They wrote one of the best shows ever for Mormon musical theater people to go be in, because it really is so tailored to like the kind of guys that get turned out of BYU and the kind of talent that comes out of Utah. When I moved to New York, I was like, if I don't get to be in this show, then I'll feel very robbed. I didn't get to be in the show, but ironically, with their very crass satirical musical, The Book of Mormon, they wrote a great show for Mormon talent to go be in. I mean, it's like very suited to the skill set that comes out of this place. Yeah.
Well, shout out to Mormon Church. One thing you do right is create a lot of good performing artists. I will say this, I don't want to take away from your shout out, because shout out for sure. But the weird thing is that they raise these kids that love musical theater, that love singing, that love performing. And then when they become adults, they're like, but don't do it. It's a really bad career that's not very lucrative. Yeah. And you should go get a job doing something else. And it's like, well, why'd you teach me to be in love with this then? So there is a lot of like, once you're grown up, it's just a hobby that you shouldn't actually pursue as a career. Although the church was super encouraging of the Osmonds. Like the Osmonds were like tied with the church.
If you can be famous, if you can be David Archuleta, like, they'll boost that up. If you can get a big audience, then for sure,
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is like the culture of the church encourages like go to school, get as much education as you can, get the highest paying job, work for the man, start your own business or something where you can have as many babies as possible.
But being a teenager is the time to be in love with theater. And then maybe as an adult, you can do it on the side as a hobby. I have a lot of friends who work at the Hale very frequently. And like, it is just sort of this side thing that they do when they can fit it in, which is hard because it's a big commitment to be in one of those shows. So.
And you don't get paid a ton of money.
Yeah. Which is part of my gripe. So, yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you loved theater.
Yeah.
You were, as far as a Mormon boy goes, you were into it.
Mhm.
You're writing your own talks. Love to get up and bear your testimony. Any favorite primary songs?
I like I always liked I can't even think of how it goes now. I think it was well, primary songs, no. I can't remember the names of them. I remember the melodies that I liked. I'll prepare myself. That's
It
while
is
I
my
am young.
sacred
It is
duty.
I like the melody
I
of that
love to
song.
see the temple.
Yeah. But so I liked the melodies. The ones that I started really falling in love with the hymns when I was getting a little bit older. I really loved like "Oh Come Thou Fount" and "If You Could Hide a Kolob." I think a lot of people like that one. I think a lot of people like Kolob because
Kind of
it's
funky.
well, and it's like just the lyrics are like it's so psychedelic, kind of to like
It's
you're
almost
just
like
tripping.
Mormon Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah, you're like, there's no end to beauty. There is no end to time. There is no end to to existence. There's no end to rhyme or reason. Like you're going down this hole of like thinking about what eternity means and the cosmos and space. And I'm like, I really like that the person who wrote that got real into imagining what it really is like to spend eternity on
You
God's
think they were
planet.
tripping on mushrooms? Is that what you're thinking?
I don't know, but maybe. But I like that one. I always was like, that one made me feel like I like the concept, you know?
It was like science fiction, but real.
Yeah.
In your head at the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe anything else about your childhood in your family, your personal life that you think will play an important part later in your story that you want to talk about before we go into adolescence?
I guess another thing, about like the how orthodox was my family is like none of us got our Eagle Scout. Like we all went to Scouts, and at a certain point, me and all my brothers told our parents, like there was a certain point for all of us where we went, I don't want to go to Scouts anymore. And they said, okay. And for a lot of my friends, that wasn't an option. Their parents were like, absolutely not. If you want to get your driver's license, if you want to live in this house, if you, if you are going to become an Eagle Scout, like that was such a big part of the culture growing up. And Scouts was sort of optional for us. And I liked it while I liked it as a kid. I liked going with my friends, but I was never super into getting merit badges or anything like that. And pretty early on into Boy Scouts, I just said, can I stop going? And they said, sure. And I stopped going, but I liked campouts and stuff. I liked going camping with my friends and making tinfoil dinners and having s'mores, but I never really liked the scouting part of Scouts. I just liked hanging out with people and doing fun activities. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like your parents weren't hardcore Orthodox Mormons, not to talk down to their Mormonism, but if they're showing you Good Will Hunting as a kid,
yeah,
they're not these Pollyanna purists.
I think my parents both had parents themselves who were people who were in the church, who loved the church, but who had their own way of doing it. Like my grandfather, for instance, he smoked cigarettes and drank alcohol, but he went to church, and and that was a different era where there were a lot of people actually who drank and went to church, and it wasn't as taboo. But because of that, and when my dad was being raised, it was still a thing where they were teaching the kids, you shouldn't drink alcohol and stuff. And he had parents who drank coffee and drank alcohol. And I think it just created two people who wanted to raise their children in the church, but also wanted to let them know that people who do things that we're trying not to do aren't necessarily awful people, and that it's okay for us to have our own way through this, that you don't have to do some of these things in order to be considered good in our eyes. We just want you to keep going to church if you can,
I mean, what you're spotlighting for me, and Carah, you may remember this, is kind of a sentiment from the Warren and Cindy Driggs episode that like outside of Utah, all the Mormons are trying to be perfect, like they perceive the Utah Mormons to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just this sometimes like in my Katy, Texas ward growing up, this hyper orthodoxy of everybody trying to be the perfect Utah Mormon ward.
Mm-hmm.
But in Utah, it's multi-generational, and there's a lot of people that are Mormon. They're as much socially Mormon as they are theologically Mormon.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of like knowing that you have to appear safe, but then having your own internal spiritual and psychological and emotional life going on underneath. and Utah maybe has had more variation or even more flavors of orthodoxy or unorthodoxy kind of under the surface, along with the whole tradition of Jack Mormons.
Yeah.
So Utah Mormonism has its own kind of undercurrents, I guess I'm saying. And it sounds like your parents were tapped into that a little bit.
Well, and you know what's so interesting is like I never felt like we were made to feel weird or like we were outsiders. If anything, I thought my friends' families were weird. I thought it was weird that like that it was so strict what they could watch and what they couldn't watch. I was always like, that's weird. But I never said anything. But my friends needed permission for everything. And I remember just telling my parents, hey, I'm going to so-and-so's house, and I jump on my bike and away I went, and I'd be back later that night, but my friends, it's like their parents needed to know where they were at every hour of the day. And no, I never got the sense that anyone was looking at my parents like they were doing a bad job, because we were active. We went to church every week, and we held callings, and we participated, and we, participated in activities. The only thing that would happen is with like the scouting thing. I had a couple guys in the church who were older, my friends' dads who were scoutmasters, who they couldn't help themselves but corner me every week at church and say, Brother Archer, I didn't see you at Scouts on Wednesday. You haven't been coming to Scouts, and it's really important that you come. And I would just kind of be like, this guy, like, get off my back. I'll come when I want, but I would tell my parents about it. I go, oh, so-and-so got on my case again today. And they just go, don't worry about it. You don't have to go if you don't want to go, Man,
it sounds like the perfect set of like common sense, practical Mormons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not these super fundamentalist, hardcore, strict, harsh, which is almost every interview we ever do. Isn't that right, Carah? Like,
besides mine, which is literally just the exact same thing as everything else I'm saying right now. Me and Austin, different. Everyone else, very orthodox, like by the book parents who.
Yours?
No, I'm saying I had similar parents in the way that.
As Austin.
Yeah, like my parents didn't care what I was doing very much.
Yeah.
Like they let us watch The Simpsons growing up. And if they don't like my foul mouth now, sorry, Mom and Dad, you guys let me watch R-rated movies. You didn't control what I watched.
It's so funny too, because The Simpsons compared to what's on TV now is like, it's so tame.
It's just South Park. It's South Park versus Simpsons.
I saw a tweet the other day.
Or freaking, what is it, Big Mouth?
Yeah.
On Netflix?
Big Mouth or Rick and Morty.
Right.
I saw a tweet the other day that said, it was like Bart Simpson, and he's saying, eat my shorts. And then it goes, moms in the 90s. This is the worst thing I've ever heard. It's like, it's really not that bad.
You watch Rick and Morty. And it's
yeah. Family Guy.
Yeah, Family Guy. All the cartoon ones kind of went down a hill after that. Yeah. I mean, uphill, downhill, whatever you want to say. But
I recently rewatched like the first 15 seasons of The Simpsons on Disney Plus, and I was like, man, this show really shaped a lot of my sense of humor. It really,
me too.
Really crafted. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Shout out to Conan O'Brien.
Oh, I know. Those writers were great.
Harvard educated.
And there's jokes that I never got growing up that I go back and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's multi-layered.
You should go back and watch the Jebediah Springfield episode. If you haven't watched that since you left the church. Me and my husband watched that again the other day. If you obviously don't know, I'm talking about Disney Plus, Jebediah Springfield episode. It's like season 7.
Yeah.
About Lisa finding out the truth about the founder of her town is not such a great guy like she thought, and she wants to go tell everyone. It says the parallel. It's the most has the most parallels to Mormonism. And Joseph Smith, you'll ever see, and you'll watch it with a different lens. So it's fun to go back and watch.
Let's add that to the show notes.
I will. I was thinking of a way I could get paid to watch it and make an episode about it. I was like,
we'll do a reaction video to it.
Yeah, like you could literally pause it and be like, "Have you said the same things, guys?"
Yeah.
Anyway,
all right,
great
okay,
stuff.
I love it. So, a common sense Mormon upbringing.
Yeah, they were just people who had a lot of non-Mormon friends and family growing up, and they had a very open mind about what we experienced and how we went through life. The only thing that we did that was really by the book was we were at church every week, and we held callings, and I went around and passed out the fast offerings around town and on Fast Sunday and all that stuff. Or not passed out, collected. But yeah.
I mean, in some ways it sounds like Mormonism at its best, because I think of a religion that's doing its job is the salt, not the meal. It kind of flavors your life, but it's not your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when people get Mormonism wrong, or any religion, it's when the salt becomes the meal, and that's when it's deadly.
I think
but if the religion is just like helping to shape your life from the parameters,
I
then
think
it can be good.
what religion wants to be, and what I would love for so many religions to become, and what they at its core, what it wants to be is it's just people in a community who live near each other coming together once a week to see if there's anything they can do to help each other.
Yeah.
How can we help each other out this week? Who needs help? So-and-so's just got a cancer diagnosis. They might need their walk shoveled this week.
Casserole.
Let's take care of them. I love that aspect of Mormonism. I love how quick Mormon people are to jump on a service project and to help each other. They see, oh, so-and-so's recovering from a heart attack. Let's go over and help them out this week. Let's rake their leaves. Let's do what we can. And at the core of what it wants to be is it's just a way for a community to be in touch with each other, to be in tune with each other, and to help each other out. I think dogma and specific stories and over-identifying with it makes it all muddy. Yeah.
That's a TikTok clip, Carah, right there.
Yeah.
Adam
Tagging.
or Austin's vision for a healthy religion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I used to sit in church and think about like, I love being Mormon, and I didn't think about the dogma things because I didn't internalize it. Like you just said, like it wasn't part of my label. My label was, how can I be a service oriented, Christ-like person in this community that serves me and I serve them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you have the right mindset, like that can be a really beautiful part of the religion.
I love it. Love it. Well, I'm glad you had a functional, healthy. You're like one of 100 people that we interview. that and maybe that's bias of who we interview. Maybe people with unhealthy Mormon upbringings end up believing the church and end up on Mormon stories. But I'm very happy that for you had a super healthy, functional Mormon upbringing. And it's weird how that ended for you, Mormon wise. But we'll get to that in the chronology. Yeah. All right. So let's do your adolescence.
Okay. Again, coming from the household that I came from, I always swore, probably from the age of 12 on. I had a real big potty mouth and I liked it. And me and my friends would just talk that way. And I was, even amongst my friends that were all LDS, I probably swore more than anyone else. And I would always try to get my friends to swear more. And my high school, one of my high school girlfriends, I remember I would always
Alta High or
Brighton High.
Right.
I would always encourage her, like when she would swear in the car, like someone would cut her off and she would swear, I'd be like, I'd be like, hey, but like we both went to church and stuff. And but I always had friends who weren't LDS. I always had friends who were living life in a more alternative way. And it was very important for me to have that. The messaging from church was like, we should surround ourselves with like-minded people. We should avoid people who are going to be a bad temptation or a bad influence. That's a bad example. It was always my inclination that I could be the good example to them, that I was like, and also that I was trying to show that I'm a safe person for you to be around and be yourself around, and it's okay. My friends would drink around me. My friends would smoke around me and stuff like that. And I didn't imbibe in anything as a teenager. But I made it known that I was a safe person to be around if they wanted to be themselves. And I even talked about it in church. Like I said, I love talking in church. I would give talks about how I remember giving a talk on magnifying your calling. And I said, I think as church members, we all have a calling to do daily missionary work and try to sort of let our light shine and be an example to other people. And I said, I don't know how we can do that if we're actively trying to keep these people out of our lives, and keep having them in our lives is conditional on their behavior. If their behavior is not in alignment with our values, then maybe we should keep them out because they're a bad influence. And I kind of gave this talk as a teenager. I remember sort of chastising the ward about, I sort of talked about some of my friends, and then I said, now saying that about my friends, I bet some of you have an idea of what that means about me and stuff like that. And I don't know, I was always interested in that side of things, of even approaching my experience as a Mormon from a different view and getting my other LDS friends to have a little bit more of an open mind and be okay with the fact that there are different shades of people having different experiences, even in our own community, even though it doesn't look like it, it doesn't feel like it always, but there are, and we should be open and welcoming to all those people.
Man, it sounds super healthy and progressive. Were you say something, Carah?
I just wanted to ask, like, what gave you the different worldview that you were able to do that? Was it the friends? Was it your parents that made you feel like you could reach out and say that so boldly as a teenager?
I think it was my parents and it was my friends, and it was just like having friends that I always, like I said, I always wanted my friends to feel comfortable around me and to know that I was a safe person to talk to. But I think I think it was the desire to be a good ambassador of the church, and not in the way that I'd been taught to, by just being like, well, just live the principles and it will rub off on people. But being like, I just want them to know that we're not all stuffy, judgmental people. And it was sort of a desire to be a good ambassador of the message. But I gotta say also, I wasn't the most progressive guy. I still had a lot of problematic areas, of course. I remember I had friends who confided in me their sexuality as a teenager, and my response, and first of all, I think really cool that they trusted me with that they, as teenagers, they trusted me that I was a safe person to talk to about that. But then I feel like I let those people down, because I said, hey, I totally get it. That's totally all right. Listen, I struggle with porn and masturbation, and I try not to do those things, and I have to abstain from those things. So like, we're going to be in this together. You're just going to have to try not to do that. Just try to push that down. And I just didn't understand the complexity of like, what I'm saying to this person is at a certain, I still get to have romantic relationships, and I still get to have girlfriends that like maybe I make out with, and maybe we go a little too far and like do a little bit of like rubbing on each other's whatever. But like, you don't get any of that. You have to fully abstain from physical contact or any kind of romantic, and I didn't understand that that's what I was saying, and that it wasn't an equal, it was a false equivalence. And I used very homophobic and derogatory language, very like lightheartedly and jokingly as a kid and as a teenager. And it's just what we did, but it's the culture that we were in. And I was very afraid of, and I've realized as an adult that, we can talk about this later, but that homophobia stems from an internal fear of yourself and what might be going on internally, because we're raised in this society that one of the worst things that could happen to me as a person is to find out that I'm gay as a teenager or something, and realize, oh my, like, that's one of the worst things that could happen to a Mormon kid, is realizing, oh no, I've got the thing that means that I might lose my entire family. I might be, and
cursed by God.
And I think that internal fear is being projected out, is what happens with a lot of homophobia that you hear teenagers express and stuff, and people express in the world. I know now that that's where it came from me, because being a theater kid, being an artistic kid, being a creative kid, I had people calling me gay all the time as a kid, and bullies at school making fun of me and calling me a sister mister and stuff like that. And I was very offended by it always. And I was like, I don't know why they say that about me. It's not true.
You took that as an insult.
Yeah. And
which shows some homophobia in your
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And I took it as an insult, and I realized in college that it isn't an insult, and that I needed to just look internally and go, well, examine it first. Are you? Do you have anything in there that you're not looking at or that you're repressing? And it's okay. Like, give yourself permission to look at it. And then if you're not, like, what does that mean? Like, okay, so it's not a bad, and then how do you feel about these people that you're friends with who are gay and who are, but as a teenager, I just wasn't emotionally progressed enough to hold space properly for my friends who were coming to me with that stuff. And they've all been very gracious in adulthood at forgiving me for that, and saying like, I know you were a teenager under, the influence of this very, very influential thing that you were raised with. And I appreciate that you've come around, because I've talked to all these people in adulthood and said, I'm so sorry that I wasn't more supportive of you when you came to me. And a lot of them, their experience was like, I felt like you were being supportive in your way. You were trying to help.
Better than others.
Yeah, and but I definitely look at that and go, I still was operating under the idea that there was something wrong with having, just being born a certain way.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you got right to it. We always spend some time in that chair talking about the law of chastity and how that reigns supreme over a Mormon teenager's life. Yeah. You went right to the porn and masturbation. Is there anything you want to say about, I was going to ask you what kept you from having some years of like Jack Mormonism. There's kind of a stereotype of some of the Utah Mormon kids like partying and then repenting right before their mission.
Sure.
So talk about that if you want, but also talk about the extent to which law of chastity stuff influenced you or didn't in the shame spiral and all that.
Yeah. That was the the big cross to bear growing up was
for non-Mormons
that I couldn't stop looking at porn and I couldn't stop masturbating. And I started when I was like 14 years old, 13, 14 years old. And I started with friends. We like found it all together. The internet was just really becoming popular.
Around what year?
This is probably year 2000, 2001.
And what did the church taught you about porn and masturbation?
That you're a terrible person. I mean, no one had really talked about it. I don't think I actually talked about it with leaders till I was 14 or 15. And then I will say I was met with a lot of compassion and understanding from the people that I talked to one-on-one. I look back at that stuff as an adult and I go, I don't know that I like that a guy down the street who was my neighbor was asking me about how often I masturbate. I don't like, but as a kid, that's just what we did. And, but the bishops that I had were very good to let me know that, hey, just so you know, you're not the only person in this ward who's dealing with this problem. In fact, it's pretty much everyone who comes in here and talks to me. So don't worry. There's not something uniquely wrong with you, that you're specifically bad. Don't worry. It is a very common thing that you're dealing with. And you've done a good and brave thing coming in here and talking to me. They're very compassionate. And they, that being said, it still was the express that I need to try harder to not do it and to abstain from it. And so the struggle of my young life was, how many days can I get? How many weeks can I put between relapses? And it really was like, without really knowing it, like a young experience with addiction and what causes addiction, I think, for a lot of Mormon people in this vein is just the fact that you're not allowed to do it. It's not necessarily a thing that's unmanageable, that's like hurting anyone or that's causing, and it can be. Sex addiction can absolutely become a compulsory thing that becomes something where you're not honoring your commitments with people and you're not able to show up in relationships because you are compulsive about this thing. It can absolutely become that way. But I think a lot of times in Mormon culture, people will label themselves as a sex addict when really all they're dealing with is just having a libido and trying to shut it off completely. And the fact that that's kind of impossible and kind of antithetical to the human experience and kind of, so I definitely was struggling with that as a kid. What didn't help was the fact that all of my friends lied to me and said that they weren't doing it. Cause I tried to talk to my friends at sleepovers and stuff and be like, hey, are you guys also struggling with this thing? And my friends would be like, nope, I don't do that. I'm not. So, and that was not helpful. And then it didn't come out till we were adults or till they came back from their missions that they were like, oh yeah, we were all doing that, And, so that was the, I think that's a very common thing, but that was kind of my cross to bear as a kid was, like getting caught by my parents, like having my dad take me for a drive and the sinking feeling of, I remember my dad said, do you know what a cookie is? And I said, like, what do you mean? Like a cookie, like a thing you eat? And he goes, no, on the internet. Do you know what a cookie is? And I said, no. And he goes, a cookie is a thing that kind of pings your web browser and it saves where you've been. So there's a web history with these cookies. And he goes, it was my brother-in-law at the time. And he goes, I was having him go through and kind of do a sweep on my computer and just clean it out for any viruses. And he found quite a lot of these cookies from pornographic websites. And as you're sitting there with your dad as just a teen, it's just the feeling of just like, the pit of your stomach going, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe that there's no way I can say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't, and it was awful. And one by one, I had a few friends who would tell me, man, my parents caught me, like they found out, either they tried to buy something, they tried to order something with a credit card or something, or, their parents just saw their search history because we didn't know what we were doing on the internet. And again, my dad, to his credit, tried to approach it with a lot of compassion and let me know that don't worry, it's normal, but you gotta try. It was said, we don't want that in our house. You gotta try to. So that was the thing that I was walking around with going, geez, I don't know why I can't get a handle on this thing. I don't know why I can't, It was the one thing. And I think it might have been that thing and trying so hard to get a handle on it that made me so certain that I was never going to try drugs and alcohol. I remember at an early age, like 13 or 14, being like, well, if I can just keep it to this one thing, that's my problem, and I can ace everything else, then at least my average score of how I'm doing as a Mormon is like pretty good, like.
Especially because you knew everyone else was already doing the one thing you were doing.
Yeah. So I'm only struggling with the thing that everyone else is struggling with, but I'm going to get everything else right. And it was almost like to make up for the fact that I can't seem to get a handle on this problem.
Yeah.
I'm not drinking. Now I swore, but that's also because I think I've always thought that, that like naughty words were a weird thing.
Plus Jay Golden Kimball swore.
Yeah.
Did you know about that?
I know about Jay Golden.
See?
Yeah.
So that there's lore in Mormon lore of a Mormon general authority who swore.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives you.
I always thought the replacement words were silly. I always thought that shiz and like dang and heck and stuff. I was always just like, it just is weird that everyone knows what we're saying. It's so weird that we don't, as a culture, like adults, like aren't saying the words.
Non-Mormons have no idea. So non-Mormons out there, what we do in Utah to replace swear words is we say, instead of the F word, we say fetch or flip or farg.
Yeah.
Or bastage.
Yeah.
Or
bastage.
Shiz or what?
Yeah.
Fudge. My 7-year-old says fudge now. And I was like, oh, that's the Mormonism coming out, kid.
I remember the closest that I think we ever got is we started just saying biff or shit. We would like say that. We'd be like, dude, biff or shit. Like we would like say that. And it was like, you would just leave off the last sound in the word. But it's kind of like, you're just it's like stepping up to the edge of the transgression, but being like, I'm not doing it. Yeah. And I also think that this is a funny thing about religion, and all religions have this. They have these rules that are sort of unreasonable and that don't make a lot of sense. And they all agree that we're all going to like break the rule by bending it. And it's this weird way of like thinking that we're tricking God, that it's like, hey, if God's got this rule, and the example I always use is like Hasidic Jewish people, they can't use electricity on a certain day. I think it's Friday or Saturday. I can't remember. And they have these light switches in their homes that it's a light switch that you flip that then flips another switch that flips another switch that turns the light on. And it's sort of like the idea is that this circuit is what's turning the light on, but I didn't do it by flipping this switch. And it's this workaround to using electricity and I'm always like, do you think that God's up there like, oh, well, you figured it out. You figured out a pretty clever little hack there. So I guess technically.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I did an interview once with Tova Mirvis on Mormon Story. She was an Orthodox Jew. Something like the elevators in New York are set to go to every single floor on Saturdays, which is the Jewish Sabbath.
Yeah.
Because you can't push a button
right.
to call the elevator. But if the elevator is just all the time going to every floor, you can step on the elevator.
It would just happen to be here, and I stepped on.
And somehow God's cool with that.
So I think that fake words are kind of like that, where like you're finding a little workaround saying the thing that you're saying, but you're like, oh, I'm saying it in a different sound. So
God's cool with
that. And God's like, oh, good on you for finding the little trick to like still cursing. It's just bizarre the ways that people think, because what it says to me is it's an admission that the rule is unreasonable, that the rule doesn't really make reasonable sense in modern society, but we're going to try our best to still do it. We'll just find a little cheat code.
So one of our listeners or viewers, other sheep, writes, what the frickety flip? So they're mentioning frick. I had some Idaho roommates at BYU. They're like, frick.
Yeah.
And flip is another one. And of course, I'm sure this is reminding you, Carah, of like soaking and all that.
No, it was actually reminding me of a Simpsons episode where I already quoted at the beginning of this. Ow, my freaking ears.
My freaking ears.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's how the Flanders kids talk too.
But it is like soaking. It's like the workarounds.
It's the workaround. It reminds me of people rolling up their garments too. Like if the garments, you guys, ladies out there, when your crotch is here, but the garments are like down here and you roll them up and then it's like, oh, and also conveniently, these are like booty shorts now. Oh, God's fine with it. That's what a lot of people do.
Because I still have them on.
I still am wearing my garments. They just happen to like hug my butt nicely now. What are you going to do, God? I'm still wearing them. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that. Soaking.
I remember asking a Hasidic friend when I lived in New York about the curlets that come down the men's faces. And my friend had some that he pinned in. They were fake. You know, a lot of men wear fake ones. And I said, what's the thing with the hair that comes down the sides? And he goes, well, we believe that you're not supposed to cut the hair that grows along the side of your face. And I said, but that's not growing along the side of your face. So if you don't have naturally the hair that's coming down, and you don't have a natural sideburn, like I don't grow a big long sideburn either, but I'm like, are you tricking God by pinning in fake hair? What is, yeah. But so, and then Mormons have, floating and, or even the weird thing of having anal sex before they have sex, because it's like, well, if it can't get pregnant doing it. And I'm like,
it's the poop hole loophole.
Yeah, the poop hole loophole. It's funny too, because I always go, that's a step further than a lot of people take it. Like most couples that are having sex don't. That's like it's kind of a kinky thing.
Yeah,
but, you know. So this is the PG-13 aspect of the show.
PG-13, we just hit it. Carah, were you going to say something else?
No, I should not.
Yeah.
I don't want to take it R. So
Carah's thinking of all the jokes that she wants to, that she's not telling.
I mean, we could talk about this endlessly. The loopholes that Mormons go through. Of this God, I always worshipped a God. At least when I was Mormon, he knows what's on my heart, and he knows exactly what I want to do, and he's proud of me that I'm not doing it. And that's all that I need. That's all I need. And so, if I'm using a fake swear word, it's because I am being so obedient to not saying that thing, and God is so proud of me, and blessings abound. You know,
I remember that explanation that if you don't understand why a rule exists, you don't need to understand it's always a test of obedience. That, like, I remember asking about shirt color and being like, I don't get why there's a specific shirt color. That doesn't make sense to me. That
for Mormons, it's got to be white.
Yeah, it seems
Mormon
really
men
petty.
have to wear white shirts on Sunday.
And it seems really petty. And I really liked wearing like a pastel yellow shirt to church, or like a pastel blue, or like I really liked mixing up my shirt colors. And I just was like, I don't get why. And I know that there was the reference to white and delightsome and stuff like that. And I would say as a teenager, I'd go, yeah, but that whole thing has always struck me as kind of racist. And like, and then the answer that I would get is, well, can you be obedient? Can you just show obedience? Right. Can you just say, I'll do that thing, even though I don't necessarily agree with it?
That's what it always comes down to, is obedience to authority is the one true immovable Mormon doctrine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carah's nodding.
Yeah. Then you find yourself at 30 years old where you're like, why can't I drink a cup of coffee? Research. Here I am. Anyway.
You end up on Mormon Stories as a co-host.
Yeah. Things just happen when you're like, why do I need to be obedient?
Why can't I drink a cup of coffee? Yada, yada, yada. Mormon Stories.
Well, here we are.
It's pretty much like, why do I need to be obedient to this really arbitrary thing that other prophets, like Joseph Smith, drank
wine, drank beer, drank coffee.
You know what's so funny is all this.
Jesus had a beard. Like, what are we doing?
All the stuff that you can't do. Like, I found out in a different way why I can't do it. I can't drink coffee because I have a constitution that doesn't do well with like stimulants. So like, I found out like, oh, I just can't do it. It gives me anxiety attacks. Like I have a panic attack every time I have a cup of coffee. So I can't drink coffee, even though I like the taste of it and I like the initial way it makes me feel, but then so I can't do stimulants,
Long story short, word of wisdom is true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
And we all know Jesus is one big BYU honor code violation, whether it's the shoulders, it's the midriff, it's the beard. Jesus would be arrested as soon as he stepped on BYU.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing, the facial hair thing too. Like, and there seem to be these sort of grooming and appearance guidelines that were like established in like the 50s. And I'm like, yeah, but if you can understand that they were updated from 1830 when the church was founded to now, why would there not be another update in 50, 60 years? Why would it not continue to be updated? Like at some point, this style guideline was contemporary and was the style guideline of the contemporary time. If contemporary style has moved on and what a well-groomed or good, a person looks like has changed, why can't you update it? Yeah.
The truth is, we used to be pioneer beard, polygamous sort of image.
Yeah.
And when we changed to kind of IBM employee executive 1950s white shirts and skinny ties kind of thing.
FBI agent.
And we can't change our identity too much, or it looks like our prophets are changing with the times. So we only get to we only get to change our physical appearance identity like once every 100 years.
Yeah.
So we've got another, I don't know, 50 years before we can do that. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
So you had the porn and masturbation torment.
Yeah.
But you didn't do the Jack Mormon thing as a teen.
No, I mean, like all my friends for the most part were still LDS, and we were all still really kind of trying to keep each other accountable and stuff. And most of the girls that I was dating were LDS. So like the worst that would ever happen with a girl is we would like maybe rub our pelvi together. I don't know if that's a word, pelvi, but that's what I'm saying. Like the plural of pelvis is. And that would happen where they would like touch. And then the next time I saw her, she would go, I want to talk about what happened last time we were kissing. And I don't think we should do that anymore. And I would kind of think in my head, like, give me a break. It was just, there was several layers of clothing between, but I didn't have a ton of opportunity to do the Jack Mormon thing. I did, like I said, I'd go to parties where people were drinking and stuff like that, but it wasn't appealing to me for some reason as a teenager. I would kind of drive my friends around when they'd be stoned or when they'd be drunk. And I kind of liked being DD and kind of being in control. And I didn't like what looked to me like they looked stupid to me. They looked like they were, slurring their speech and laughing at stupid things. And I was kind of like, I like watching you and driving you around and having this conversation with you, but I don't, so it didn't seem appealing at the time. And so
through high school, did you ever even try alcohol?
No,
not once.
Not one drop.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Okay. So really quickly, what about, two things. What about, let's talk about, so you had experienced, you had an agent since you were 8 or 9, you had been in commercials. To what extent were you on track to like become the next Clark Johnson or Donnie and Marie? Like what were you doing high school wise creatively? And how did you envision your career taking off post high school while you were in high school?
Yeah, I think that, like I said, I think most of the people I went to high school with would not be surprised that I stuck with it and that I kept doing it and that this is what I'm doing with my life.
What musicals in high school were you in?
Oh, geez. We did Godspell. I was Jesus in Godspell.
Nice.
It was very controversial because Mormons,
Brighton High?
Yeah, Mormons will get like, they'll be like, you can't do a musical about Jesus. That's sacrilegious. But they've never seen the musical. They don't even know what it is. Right. They're just like, well, you can't be singing like, kind of like pop songs about Jesus. That's bad. And it's actually a very wholesome show. It's like, it's very, very tame. And so we did that. We did Footloose, and I was the Kevin Bacon part in Footloose, and we did Seussical, and I was the Cat in the Hat and Seussical. And
well, you were like, you were super popular in your high school then.
I had a lot
star and lead in every musical they did.
Yeah. Well, and I was involved in a lot of things. I was in student government, and I was in choir, and I was in theater. And then I had friends in every circle. I had friends on the football team and friends that were, cheerleaders and drill team and all that stuff. So I was a guy, when I was walking through the halls, I had a friend in every group, and I was, I just was known by a lot of people. But I think everyone knew that I was going to go off and try to be an actor, and that I was, even in, like, I remember we had this creative writing magazine that would be published every year at school, that kids would submit poems and short stories, and then they would compile them into this like book that you could buy that was called Runes. And it was like a literary magazine from our school. And the teacher who put that together put posters all over the school of my face. It was like my headshot, and she goes, buy Runes, and megastar Austin Archer will sign a copy of your of your thing. And she didn't ask me if she could do it. I just showed up to school one day, and that was all over the school. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But I had a kind of a funny relationship with that teacher where we would kind of razz each other and go back and forth. But I was also that kid. I was like the kid that was on first name basis with all the teachers, like going into their office and being like, hey, Mike, how we doing? Like getting people to bump up my grade by kind of smooth talking them and stuff. And I was also like never in school. I was always leaving school.
Sounds like Ferris Bueller almost.
I was always leaving. I was always taking off and getting teachers to give me exceptions to things. And I remember my seminary teacher calling me one day because I hadn't shown up to class, and he left a voicemail, and he went, Brother Archer, you missed it. President Nelson came in and he just surprised the class and he gave us a talk and you weren't there.
Did he really?
No.
He's making that up?
Yeah, no, he's just making it up. But you would just say that stuff to go like, man, you missed it, you know? But yeah, I was a really gregarious kid and I was a real people person and I could make friends with anybody. And I was the lead in all the shows. And
were you like most prom king or most likely to succeed? All that stuff?
Yeah, there's a dance where there's a sophomore duke and a junior prince and a senior king, and I was all three of them.
Oh my god, he's insufferable.
I got your character down in my head for. Yeah, I got exactly what kind of kid in high school you were. My kids are actually going to end up going to Brighton because I live right around the corner.
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
So I was a kid going through the halls doing this to lots of people.
Yeah,
okay.
I was going like that.
So I have to ask, if I had asked you your senior year in high school, okay, you're going to be famous. How is your career going to go? How are you? What's going to be the path to stardom? What would you have said as a senior in high school? I'm going to do X, Y, and Z.
You know what's funny is everyone else was always the people telling me that I was going to be famous, and I was the one. I never my entire life, and I think it's because I think it's because of the way my parents would talk about it. My dad was a very pragmatic guy. And I've talked about this, like how LDS parents will raise kids who are showbiz people, but then they'll sort of discourage a career in the arts. My dad was very supportive, but he wanted me to know the number of risks. He just wanted me to know, like, hey, just so you know, being really good at something that's this hard to do isn't a guarantee that you're going to be able to do it. For every person that was the lead in all the schools at their high school, maybe 1 out of 1,000 makes it into the career, you know, and so he would try to really present the numbers to me in a realistic way. What I wanted to do in high school and in college, and again, I've always had people who would come up to me and go like, you're going to be famous. Like, if anyone at this school is going to be famous, it's going to be you. I never believed that. And I would never let myself believe that because I had this feeling like, the odds just aren't for it. The numbers aren't for it. And I wanted to be realistic and I didn't want to crush myself by thinking if I'm not famous by age 25 or whatever, then I failed. My goal was always, I want to work in the field. I want to be in the field. I want to be making money doing this thing. So if I can be a working actor, if I can be reasonably respected by my colleagues and by my peers, that'll be enough. And that was my goal in college. And to a large extent, that's still my goal. Like all I want to do is keep working, and being popular on the internet just helps me do that. It helps me keep working. It helps me. Yeah.
So did you have a path in mind as a high school senior? Like, I'll go to college and then I'll go to Broadway and then.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you this again in college, and then we'll see what happens.
I was going to live in New York City. I knew that. I'd visited New York a few times as a teenager. The first time I went, I was 12 years old. And
you ever see Broadway shows?
Oh yeah, we saw The Lion King and we saw Les Miserables, and Les Miserables was life-changing for me. We saw Into the Woods, which I didn't realize was going to be so life-changing for me because I was too young to really appreciate Stephen Sondheim, and Stephen Sondheim became my.
Did he just pass away?
He just passed away. Yeah. And it was very difficult for me. I just did a podcast episode about it. I was like, he's just a very important person to me and a very important artist. And that was one of the first Broadway shows I ever saw was Into the Woods. And then I went back in high school. We did a high school theater trip to New York. And that was the trip where I was like, I went out with my friends one day without parental supervision. And I was like, let's just go away from where everyone else is. And let's just like go out into the city for a day. And we actually wound up getting lost, and it was really scary because we were teenagers and our parents were like, where are you? You know, but I knew on that trip, when we made it back on our own, when we found our own way back, I was like, I can live here. I can do this. And so the plan was go to college, get a degree in theater, and move to New York and try to be on Broadway. And even
you wanted to be a Broadway performer.
Yeah. And even that idea seemed too lofty for me. I was still saying, like, if I can be on a tour, or if I can, like, when I was in college, the big stage that I wanted to get on was Pioneer Theater. Yeah. That was like,
that's the University of Utah theater, sequence that happens every year.
Yeah.
They do 6 musicals or whatever.
And even in high school, we would go, they do a show for all the local high schools for every production that they're doing at Pioneer. They do a matinee once a run where all the local high schools come and watch for free. And my high school went to all of those. And I was in high school, I was like, the idea of being a principal role on that stage was insane. Was like, maybe someday if I'm lucky, I'll be in the ensemble of one of those shows.
Nice.
And so I still thought that, so my idea of what I could achieve in this field was I always was like, keep it modest, keep it modest. Yeah. And hoping that I could surprise myself with maybe doing a little bit better.
Yeah. Set the expectations low, then you won't be devastated and disappointed.
And I've met people in this career who, from the day I met them, they went, hi, nice to meet you. I'm going to win an Academy Award someday. Like, not that direct, but they would be like, I'm going to win. And I always think like, okay, we'll see. You know, it's very hard, but we'll see. And those people do well because I think there's something about you know.
Dude, I've mentioned this before, but I just have to say it. So I went to high school with Renee Zellweger, and she called me when I was at BYU. Somehow we got back in touch after my mission, and I'm like, hey, Renee, what are you going to do? Like, what, you know, she's like, I'm going to be an actress. I'm like, oh, no way. You know?
Well, so
prove me wrong.
I mean, I've had ex-girlfriends who
she ended up winning the Academy Award. She had that.
I had ex-girlfriends who told me when we were together, they said, I'm going to be on Broadway. And I would say, you're so talented. You're one of the most talented people I've ever met. I know you can do it. I just want you to know that it's very hard. And both of the ex-girlfriends I've had who told me I'm going to be on Broadway have been on Broadway.
Yeah. So it worked.
You know,
it works.
So it's like, I'm like,
confidence works.
Maybe my problem is that I've always been selling myself short. I've had people my whole life saying, dude, you're the guy, go do it. And I've always been like, hey, if I can just get in the back door somehow, squeeze in, if I can just find a seat at the table and just be getting paid, I'll be happy. I'll count myself.
The lesson I'm hearing is make big, bold goals.
Yeah. Maybe
don't make wimpy goals.
Maybe be a little like
shoot for the sun and you'll hit this moon.
I just watched King Richard, and like that guy plotted out his kids' lives before they were born. He went,
that's a great movie.
He went like my kid, you know, he's telling everybody, my 2 girls, they're going to be the best that ever played the game. Teaching his kids how to play tennis in Compton, and he's going, they're going to be the best that ever changed. They're going to change the game.
Venus and Serena Williams. Great movie. We'll add it in the show notes. King Richard.
And they're undoubtedly the two best.
Yeah.
They're undoubtedly.
It's a great movie. Yeah.
And
okay. Real quick, before we leave high school, how was your faith life? By the time you were a senior in high school, what was your testimony like? And how are you going to reconcile the path the Mormon church wanted for you to take, mission, temple marriage, all that, with your aspiring theatrical aspirations?
Yeah. Strong testimony. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, as they say.
You would bear testimony.
Oh boy, I knew, man. I knew more than I knew anything. I knew that this thing was the thing, and that I was so lucky to be born into it. And
that it was the true church.
Oh yeah. And I was hyped on going on a mission. I was ready. I was, I had to think, do I want to even go to a semester of college first, or do I just want to do some mission prep and then get out there? My birthday's in January. The change to 18 years old being the age hadn't happened yet. So it was still 19 years old you would go. And I had to think, do I want to even go to a semester of college first? Or do I mean, I was chomping at the bit. I was just.
So you were Elder Price.
Yeah, I was ready to go. I was ready to go change the world. I was going to blow people away. And, I'd gone to EFY, and EFY is like such a huge edifying experience for youth. If they, everyone gets together and you cry and you bear your testimony to each other. And then your counselor says, go back to your room and ask God on your own if this is right for you. And just let the answers come. And me and my roommate for the week go back to our room, and sitting across from each other, we both bawl our eyes out in our quiet prayers, and we turn around and we hug each other, and we both know. And it's our white light moment. It's our moment where we know I'll never be able to deny that this happened. I'll never be able to deny that I felt this way. So I'm locked in. I'm like ready to go.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm dying to hear what happens next. So you're prom king, you graduate, most likely to what? Were you voted most likely?
I was voted in the yearbook most likely to win an Academy Award.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what happens to Austin Archer when he graduates from Brighton Bengals?
Yeah. So it's so interesting. I wanted to go to BYU and do their musical theater program,
which is no slouch, right?
Yeah, it's a real deal. And I wrote them a letter for my submission. First of all, I went down and auditioned, and I wasn't crazy about the audition because there were so many people there, and they didn't really even know who I was. And I had like tried to.
Why weren't you offered a scholarship just based on your credentials?
Yeah,
did you send them a tape of all your performances?
There are people coming in from all over the world.
Yeah.
Mormon kids coming in from all over the world to study there, and I sent them an essay that I wrote that was talking about how I love this field so much and I love acting so much, but I don't want to compromise my values to do it. And I don't want to be in a place like the University of Utah that's going to make me do plays that say the F word and maybe do plays that have nudity in them, or like, and I was like, I want to be able to work in this field and I don't want to compromise my values. And I thought that they would really respond to that. And nobody ever replied to me. And I auditioned and I got in the program, but I didn't get a scholarship. And then I went up and auditioned at Weber State University. And at the time it was being run by a guy named Jim Christian, who's known well in the theater community here in Utah. And he's an LDS guy, but what Jim does really well is he knows everybody's name and he makes you feel like welcome home. Like you come in to his audition and he knows your name and he remembers where he met you and what you sang for him. And he makes you feel like $1 million. And Weber State University offered me a full ride scholarship, just everything paid for. And it was kind of a no brainer. So I went.
You probably didn't write them the same letter you wrote BYU.
I did not.
And there's a chance that the BYU theater faculty were more progressive. And they're like, I don't want some tightwad student here, like worried about swearing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, like I remember Charles Menton, he was a professor BYU theater program and I was there. He was really progressive and kind of liberal. I mean, there's a chance that essay worked against you, is all I'm saying.
I went and auditioned for the actor training program at the University of Utah, and the woman who runs that, her name's Sarah Shippabotham, she's still there. And she's asked me since, she's gone like, why did you not accept my offer? But it's because she said straight up, she sat all these kids down and she went, we don't deal with ninnies here. And if you're going to be a ninny and if you're going to like sue, because they had a problem, they had a student sue the program because the program was trying to make her say a bad word in a play. And she sued the program for her religious freedom they said, well, that's fine. You just won't be in the play and we'll cast someone else. And she said, you're discriminating against me. Yeah. And so they said, we don't want those students in our program.
Don't come.
And so if that's you, that's totally fine. Go down south. There's a program down there where you'll fit in just fine. This is not the school for you. And it scared me off. I went, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm trying to go on a mission. Weber State seemed like a place where I could have my cake and eat it too, where I could, the program was really coming on strong too. There were a lot of people talking about it and saying the theater program up there is really developing. And it wasn't as competitive to get in as the U and BYU were. It was a little bit like a well-kept secret at the time. And I thought, I'm going to go here. This will be a safe place. Lots of other LDS kids who I can, kind of stay safe with. And so I went to Weber State and almost immediately was put to the test. Like almost immediately. Like I made friends fast because that's what I do. I'm a people person and I'm gregarious and I'm like, and I think I got cast in a show right away in the ensemble. And again, like I didn't go in there thinking I'm going to be the lead in every show. I went in thinking I'm the new guy. I got to pay my dues and be in the background. I was happy to be in a show. And there was a girl in that show who was an upperclassman who asked me if I wanted to hang out after rehearsal one night, and I was like, yeah, sure. And she was very good looking. And she asked me where I was living. And I said at the dorms, and she showed up at my dorm room and like, didn't waste any time, just started like making out with me. And I'm this kid, and it was like the most aggressive thing I'd ever had in my life to that point, right off the bat, like maybe month one of being at Weber State University. And I had to like the biggest thing that I'm struggling with is my sex drive, like porn and masturbation. And I've got this girl who's like on top, who's just, and I had to shut it down. And I was like, I'm so sorry to do, I'm trying to go on a mission. And I remember her being like, all right, dude. All right. And she was kind of like, I bet you're not going to be going to church by the end of the year. And I was like, I think you're wrong, but I appreciate it. I hope we can stay friends. And she was like, yeah, we will. She's like, but I'm just letting you know right now, I bet you're not going to be going to church by the end of the year. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, and then I got invited to parties because the people I was in the show with were going to parties, and I went to the parties, and everybody in this department was drinking, smoking weed, and I just was like, oh my God, what did I do? I put myself right in the lion's den. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. But that was the stuff that started, and it's weird that this didn't happen in my adolescence and my teenage years, because I had friends who drank and used drugs and stuff like that. But I always sort of like separated myself from them and thought that I was better than them. What was happening is I had these upperclassmen who I really, really respected, who were good people. And some of them they were behaving in a way like they were talking to me about their philosophy. And I saw the way that they treated the younger kids, and they were really nice to them and really like helpful. And they were kind of taking on this like big brother role for me. And I was noting that they were behaving very Christ-like and they were doing whatever they could to help people out. And they were really concerned with my well-being and just really kind people. And I think the behavior that I had observed at parties up to that point was teenagers going wild because mom and dad are out of town. But I was kind of like, the college kids were trying to be sophisticated about it. They were like drinking wine and discussing plays. And it seemed really cool. And like, so I went to these parties for the entire first semester, and I never drank. I didn't use, but I went to the parties because I liked being around these people, and I liked that they were sharing with me ideas and philosophies that I hadn't considered, and they were challenging me and asking me questions that no one had ever asked me before. And I really respected them. I respected their intelligence, and I respected their character. And they also seemed like they were blowing up this idea that I had grown up with, that you couldn't be happy, truly happy, outside of the church. My friends that were drinking and using drugs in high school were really struggling with it. It was putting them at odds with their parents, and it was making their home life very hard. And it looked like proof that drugs and alcohol lead to misery and to nothing good, so I don't need to worry about it. Now I had all these people who were happy, who seemed like they had their act together, and they were drinking and smoking weed, and they seemed very, I like this one guy in particular who just seemed he almost seemed like a yogi. He seemed very like Buddhist and peaceful and serene. And I just would be like, well, this guy's blowing up my notion of what a good person is, because he does all these things that a good person isn't supposed to do. And he seems more enlightened than anyone that maybe I've ever met. He seems to be more in tune with real, genuine spiritual connection than anything I've ever seen. And so that kind of blew up my notions of like having a monopoly on spirituality and having a monopoly on being good. And then by spring semester of my freshman year, I was telling my parents, I think I want to step away from the church on a trial basis. I want to see what happens if I don't go to church for a while, and just see what, and I even told them this. I said, I fully expect that I'm going to fall flat on my face, and then I'm going to roll down the hill. I'm going to let go of the iron rod. I'm going to roll down the hill into the ravine, and I'm going to be in a thorny patch of brambles, and I'm going to go, whoops, my bad. And I'm going to come back. And that was kind of the beginning.
Wow. What did your parents say?
They were very kind of baffled by it a little bit, because it was very sudden. It was like 1 week I just came into their house and I said, hey, this is what's happening. I was getting ready to go on a mission. I was doing mission prep. I had my papers and everything. And I said, before we do this, before we make a decision that I can't really take back, I actually let's put the mission on hold. Told my bishop, I'm going to put the mission on hold. And then I got into a relationship with a person who was another upperclassman, and we were dating, and we were out on this class trip to Washington, D.C. We were performing a play at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. And we were at the hotel, and I decided that night, I think I'm going to drink. I think I'm going to try drinking now that I've stepped away from the church for a little bit. And I remember what I drank. I drank green apple rum, like green apple flavored rum. And I hated it. It was awful. But I really liked the way it made me feel. And I wasn't a moderate drinker from day one. I drank heavy pretty much from the get-go. I liked it so much. I liked the way it made me feel. I liked what it did for me. It felt like the person I am, the gregarious people person that I am, really shone with a few drinks. It was like, oh, now, I mean, I'm fun sober. Oh, I'm really fun now. And I felt like I really had arrived with this new friend group, and my girlfriend and I were trying things that I had never tried before and going places that I'd never gone before. And I think the next time I had a meeting with my bishop, I told him, I said, I think I'm done. And he went, really? And I said, yeah. And I told him, I told him everything that's going on. And he goes, well, look, if you can stop that stuff and get a hold of it, we can still fix this. And I said, no, I don't think I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna keep doing it. And he just went, he mentioned a disciplinary council. He goes, what you're telling me is really, really serious. And if you have no plans of stopping, we might have to do a disciplinary council. And I said,
you weren't even an elder yet by that point.
yeah. And I said, I wouldn't show up to it if you did. And he goes, oh man, I can't believe what you're telling me. And I said, I'm just trying to be honest with you.
Holy
you know,
moly.
and I walked out, and that was the last time I ever talked to an ecclesiastical leader. That was the last time I ever really participated in anything. And yeah, I mean, I was very secure with the choice at that point. It was interesting how it steamrolled. And that girl who made the prediction was spot on. By the end of year one, I was fully out.
But that wasn't the girl you ended up with.
No, it was a different girl. Yeah.
So a couple things really quick. Number one, that's Carrie. I think you'll agree. This is like, you're in the 99th percentile of what, of Mormons, raised Mormon, especially in Utah, raised with believing nobody steps off the train before the mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. They all go on the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And then most of them get married and have the kids and then wake up when they're 30 or 40 or 50. And they're like, what happened with my life?
Mm-hmm.
But almost never does somebody step off the Mormon train pre-mission when they were a believer right up until that point. So that's super unique. Did you want to say something?
Keep going.
Yeah. The only other thing is, like, I know the Mormon mindset, and I know that going through your brain, like I would have had chance. I had a girlfriend in high school, put my hand on her boob, or like people offering me marijuana or hash or whatever, alcohol. But in my mind, there was like the Book of Mormon, Lehi's, vision of the tree of life and the great and spacious building and all the people pointing their finger and mocking at the people holding to the iron rod. And then there's that whole, and this is like, I think I have not pondered how powerful Lehi's metaphor was.
It is such a potent metaphor for so many of us.
Yeah.
It is that image of hanging onto this thing.
Yeah. Cause I was holding onto the iron rod, looking at the people in the building saying, oh, they're making fun of me. They're worldly. They're drinking, smoking, doing drugs, having sex. They're mocking me. They're pointing their fingers at me. I'm holding the iron rod. Oh, if you let go of the iron rod, you end up in the midst of darkness, falling into the river, or you end up in the great and spacious building. That's not going to be me. I'm going to tell the girl, take my hand off her boob. No, I'm not going to have that, drugs and alcohol. Yes, I'm going to go on my mission. But you made the different decision. You literally, in your mind, either you would have had to say, no, I want to be in the great and spacious building. I want to be in the midst of darkness. I choose sin and debauchery and evil and wickedness over righteousness. Or, and this is the harder thing to wrap my brain around, you would have said that whole dream, that whole Lehi's dream is false. It's not true. It's a misrepresentation of joy and happiness and reality. And I reject the dream. And
it was that one, John. It was exactly that. And that you're so right. That simple metaphor is so potent for so many people in the church. This idea of you're clinging to this thing on a very narrow, treacherous path. And if you let go at all, the path it's kind of like if you were hiking Angel's Landing and you've got that chain that you can hold on to in Zion's National Park. And like, you don't want to let go of that chain because you've got straight down cliff face on the side of you.
Die every year.
And that's the way I imagine this path, is that I'm hanging onto this pole. And if I even take one step off, I might slip and roll down the hill into a ravine, and it might be really hard to get back. What I did is I said, these people that I've met and talking with these people, and the questions they were asking me good questions. Like, I had friends asking me questions like, have you ever done anything else with your life? Have you ever tried any other philosophies out in your entire life? And I said, no, but I don't have to. I know the one that I believe in is right. And they go, but have you ever even opened yourself up to anything else? And I'd go, no. And they go, and you're going to go sell this idea to people who have done lots of other things. Don't you think you'd be a better salesman if you had maybe just like tried on a few different hats just to see what it's like? And it, you know, and that idea that
they weren't trying to tempt you. They were just basically saying, know what you're choosing and selling before you sell it.
Yeah. Right? They were just trying to say, wouldn't it make you a better representative if you could say, I've been there, done that, or if you could relate to these people a little bit more? You've only done one thing your whole life. And I couldn't get that idea out of my head that I don't have a lot of experience. I don't have a lot of perspective. And what I did was I kind of gambled that it might be okay for me to consciously let go of the rod and step into a new direction that I've never stepped into before, and do it consciously, not as a slip, not as a mistake, not as a whoops, I got tempted but as a conscious decision, I'm going to step away and see what happens. Still having all the indoctrination enough so that I fear that I'm going to fail. I'm surely what's going to happen is I'm going to fall flat on my face and be miserable, and I'm going to come crawling back. But I just want to try it just to see if it makes me a more well-rounded person. Maybe it'll just make me a person who understands a little bit more about the wide breadth of human experience.
It's basically scientific method gathering data.
Yeah.
You were gathering data.
But it was incredibly hard because, like you said, I left before my mission, which is not the typical way that this is done. And also I was the first person in my entire family, my extended family, all that
your older siblings, all went on missions.
Older siblings, my cousins, everyone. I was the first person to not do it and to not at least get that far. And
in Mormonism, to your parents, to your bishop, to your ward family, friends and family, aunts, uncles, you're just a huge disappointment.
Oh, it was just like the sense of isolation and rejection at that age was so difficult. Luckily, a lot of my friends were already on their missions when I decided I wasn't going on mine. So I had a couple of years to sort of adjust to my new normal before they got back and had to deal with me. But that was hard when my best friends got back and they were like, what happened, man? Like what, like you were the best of us. Like what happened to you, And I think, and I've told them multiple times since then, as they've become more progressive and as they've been able to have better conversations about it, that like doing that was very hard. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something that I did just because I wanted to party and I wanted to do bad things with girls. I was doing it because I genuinely wanted to examine what it was that I claimed to believe. Like I felt so sure about this thing, and I felt so sure without ever having honestly examined it. And I just felt like I couldn't in good conscience go out there and sell this to people and tell them this is the way to be happy. This is the only way, the best way for you to have a chance at happiness is this thing, if I haven't ever actually lived a day in their shoes. And so I wanted to try just having a different experience. And of course, stepping out, all it did was it just became a can of worms, and it just became, well, let's look at this. And then, oh, that's different than what I thought it was. And then let's look at this and let's look at this. And then, before long, I think the last thing to go was me finally going, oh, I don't even know if I believe in God. Like that was the last thing I was hanging on to, is like, well, this is all not working for me anymore. And Joseph Smith might not be who I thought he was, but I still have a relationship with God. And finally, then one day, I think somebody asked me, I was in the store with somebody and they were like, do you still believe in God? And I went, you know what? I don't think so. Like, and it just was that simple. And from that day on, I was an atheist,
So I was going to ask you, what years were you at Weber?
I was there from 2006 to 2010.
Okay. So I'm just in my timeline, Mormon Stories that started by that point. And so that's pre-CES letter, but post-Mormon Stories founding. Like I was going to ask you, aside from lifestyle deconstruction, which it sounds like you did, was there any truth claims, church history deconstruction that came along with that at that time, or did that come later? And if there was at that time, what were your sources? Because I guess Mormon Expression came out around 2009, 2010, but I don't want to prime you. So like, was there any truth claims or historical deconstruction?
There was some, and
what were they?
Like, just just learning more about who Joseph Smith was. I remember having friends tell me about Joseph Smith, and I would go, no, that's not right. And they would go, no, actually it is. Like you, and then I thought things about just like, they would say, did you know that he was a convicted con artist? Like that he was like convicted for being a con man. And I would go, I don't think so. I think that sounds like what like people who, you know, the people who are against him would maybe have a story of propaganda saying that he's a con artist. That makes sense to me. But then they would say stuff like, did you know that he would like kind of force people to let him marry their very young daughters and things like that. And it was just little bit by bit. And then even in my head, I just started asking myself the question, like, because I started thinking about other people who have started churches. I started thinking about L. Ron Hubbard, and I started thinking about, even the story of Muhammad. It's very similar. The guy goes to a cave and he prays and he asks God, I need to know the truth. And God reveals a book to him, and he translates the book and he brings it back, and the book is the Quran. Like, it's just, I started thinking about that, and I started thinking, what's more likely that my religion's story, that has a very similar story to lots of other religions, that there's this guy who for whatever reason becomes chosen by God to be the vessel for the message. What's more likely that he out of all of them, everyone else's is a lie. They're all shysters and con artists and people who are just trying to get power and money and influence in society. And this was the route that they went about it. Or, yeah, and then they're all fake. And mine is the one that actually is true, or that he's just another one of those guys. And it was really just that simple question that got me going. I think he was just another one of those guys. And I could even hang on to the idea that, like, and I still do, in some ways I think it's possible for these people to delude themselves and to, I mean, I remember watching the documentary Prophets Pray with Warren Jeffs, and what a disturbing documentary. Have you ever seen that? It's Prophets, Prey, like, yeah. You know, and it's about just Warren Jeffs and his many, many sex crimes that he committed while being the leader of the FLDS church. And, there's a scene in that documentary where he's in prison and his brother comes to visit him, and he tells his brother, he's very lucid, and he goes, listen, I just need you to tell everyone I made it all up. I'm not the prophet. I don't talk to God. I never have. And I've been lying about this, and I'm done with it. I'm done. My life's over. And I just want you to know it's not real. And his brother goes, Warren, no, Warren, listen to yourself. The devil's got you right now. This is Satan talking. This isn't you. This is the adversary. This isn't you. You are the prophet. You're being deceived. And as his brother's doing this, you see Warren kind of fighting it. And then he just goes, yes, you're right. I am being deceived. And he switches in the room. And it's this wild moment where you're like, he was almost there. He was telling the truth. He was being honest about the fact that he's never actually had a conversation with God. He's had feelings. He's prayed like everyone's prayed. He's had, a thought come that could be a voice from outside or but I think it's possible for these people, with enough people surrounding them, building them up and bolstering them up and saying, no, you are this. I think it is possible to get caught up in it. So I still think that there's a possibility that Joseph Smith wasn't just a guy going, I'm getting away with pulling the wool. I think there's a possibility that he was able to convince himself to a certain extent that there is a reason why I'm in the position that I'm in. I have been chosen to lead these people. Otherwise it wouldn't have worked. This story that I told wouldn't have worked if I was, so maybe this is maybe the way that this message is getting across is I have to and the story that I'm coming up with is being revealed to me for a purpose. I think it's possible that it doesn't have to be as black and white as you're a malevolent person who is just trying to get power. I even think someone like Keith Raniere, who started Nexium, could be like that, could delude himself to thinking, I'm helping people. I am helping people. And on the side, I'm having women brand my initials into them, and I'm having a little sex harem, something like that. But so that was the simple question, was what kind of man was Joseph Smith? Really? This person who it sort of all hinges on that. And then the next question was, if I don't think Joseph Smith was who my whole life have believed he is, what do I think of the Book of Mormon? Do I think that it is still an accurate record? And if I don't, then there's really no point in being here anymore. So that's sort of where I started with, was just those questions and looking into those on my own, and coming up with my own determination that it's more likely in an Occam's razor sense that he's just another person who started a church and he happened to be very successful at it. And so I was probably out 4, 5, 6 years maybe before I started to see some real stuff like CES letter and things like that, where I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even get that deep, but it tracked. It all was very validating for me when I saw that stuff. I remember the first time that I saw what a temple ceremony looked like, and it blew my mind. I was maybe 25 years old, 24 years old, probably younger than that, maybe 23. And I saw a clip on YouTube of the God makers and of a temple ceremony. And I sent it to my brother, who at the time was questioning his faith. And we had been talking about it. And I sent him the clip and I said, is this real? Is this what it looks like in there? And he goes, yeah, that's what it looks like. And I went, I can't believe that that's what you guys do. Like, that does not seem like the church that I grew up in. That seems like an entire, and I was like, no wonder people say we're a cult, because that's some creepy cult stuff. And
remember what you were watching, or is it just kind of too
that was
long
the
ago?
God Makers. It
was the God Makers.
There's a point in the God Makers where they dress in full temple
Is that
garb.
the one where they act it out?
They do
like,
it.
Yeah,
They do
straight
the
up.
hand
They do the
motions,
paleo
and they do, and that was also back when they do that.
the throat slitting,
Yeah,
the
and
disemboweling.
I just watched that thing, and I got this sinking feeling watching that. And I'd been out of the church for like 5 years at this point, but I was like, and I'd never gone through the temple because I never went on a mission. And I just thought, I can't believe I can't believe my parents are dressing up like this and doing this, and that people are that I grew up with are doing, that my friends who have all gone on missions are all dressing up and doing this. And so there were definitely moments throughout where I was comfortably out, where a thing would drop that I would be like, you gotta be kidding me. You know,
probably felt validating.
Yeah. Oh, it was very validating.
Yeah.
It was very validating. Learning about, what's his name? Mark Hoffman was very validating. It was like, yeah, of course some guy was able to just make stuff up and go, hey, look, I found a thing. Is that his name? Mark Hoffman?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was very validating. And so everything I found along the way validated my hypothesis of stepping out and saying, first of all, the initial thing was an experiment. It was, let's see what happens. And then I started having hypotheses of like, let's just allow myself to consider this through another lens. Let me allow myself to look at the church like an outsider. You know, why do people say we seem so weird? You know, and just look at it. I remember the first time I went back to church after stepping away, and I was maybe 19 years old, maybe 20 years old. And I went back to watch my nieces and nephews singing in a primary program. And it was the first time that I felt like I was watching a church service from an outside perspective. And all of a sudden, everything was different. And I saw little kids going up to the pulpit, and I saw their parents whispering in their ear what to say. And I remember growing up being taught that that's cute and that that's really sweet. Isn't it sweet, this little angel coming up and I want to say that I love, and their parents are telling them what to say. And I remember thinking that was cute. And I was watching it going, that's unsettling. That's creepy. That this kid who doesn't know anything, who has no clue of anything, is being taught in their ear, whispered in their ear, to say, I know that this is a true church. I know that this is like, it seemed wholly inappropriate to me. It seemed very misguided and kind of unfair to put that on the kid before they have a chance to develop their own sense of identity. But I'd never seen it that way in my entire life. So it was that process of just sort of bit by bit, the layers get stripped away and you start recontextualizing everything, recontextualizing the stories, recontextualizing the feelings even. I remember feeling the spirit, or what I thought of as the spirit, being with all my friends, smoking weed and drinking and stuff, and being like, oh my gosh, that's what this is its community and family and the feeling of belonging and the feeling of being seen and feeling like this is a good place for me to be. I'm safe here. And it's a feeling of love. I love these people. It's a feeling of inspiration, of I'm inspired by these people, by this place. And realizing that what I'd been taught my whole life is that Mormons have a monopoly on that feeling, a monopoly on the relationship to that feeling. Even being taught that like the only way I can feel that feeling as a baptized, fully participating member is if I am living a worthy lifestyle. Because if I'm out of touch with the worthiness, then I will lose that feeling and I will feel dark and depressed and sad. So noting that that feeling didn't leave. My relationship with the spirit didn't leave. And then I went, okay, so what is the spirit? Is it the spirit, or is it just a human sensation that everyone has access to? And so, yeah, that was kind of the process, just stripping back layers, having experiences one after another that kept validating my hypothesis, coming up with a new hypothesis, continually having it validated over and over again, to the point where I felt like I had earnestly, sincerely, with good intentions, examined this thing. And I hadn't gotten answers back that I had expected to get, but I couldn't deny the answers I was getting. That time and time again, I would run the experiment and I would run the scenario, and time again, I was getting the answer back that what I was told growing up just wasn't accurate. Yeah.
I love all of that. You kind of went through things like, I didn't have to ask a question because I was like, what, how do you recontextualize your spiritual experiences? Or like those EFY experiences that you felt like, really tied you to the church. And it just sounds like with enough experience and being that kind of outspoken, kind of gregarious person who wants to be friends with people, you can't help but just see other people in their experiences, relating it to your own and realizing, maybe the things I was taught aren't holding up. So that's kind of what I'm hearing. And like the more experiences that you had, you just like slowly worked your way through all of this. So I don't know, John, where you want to go next. My next question is, how, as you're working through this, are you still able to stay in good relationship with, believing family, believing friends? Do you just not talk about the church? Do you talk about your process as you're slowly getting out of it? How did your relationships with Mormons kind of just go from that place? Because it feels like once you recognize these things, it's hard not to share it with other people.
Yeah.
And if you are you the type of person who you're like, I don't want to tell you the truth that I found about the church?
Yeah. It is hard. I don't want to yuck anybody's yum, and I don't want to, rain on anybody's parade. And if people are managing to live the lifestyle that they live without hurting other people, I'm happy to leave them to it and to say, you're just fine. If you're not hurting anybody, if you're not causing anybody unnecessary pain, then I think you're fine. Certain things the first few years of me being out were very difficult. Cause like I said, I was the only person in my family. I was the only one. And, it was just kind of this thing that was looming over us. And I preferred to not talk about it. I would even tell them, I'd say, let's just we don't have to do it, but every once in a while it would just sort of bubble up and it would just happen and it would be there. And all of a sudden we're in a conversation, and multiple times it happened where it would be my entire family in a room surrounding me. And it would be me against
all the RM siblings.
Yeah. And they would,
parents,
and I would go, guys, look what's
spouses.
happening right now. Like, I'm in a corner and you guys are cornering me. And I'm like, look what's happening. I don't feel comfortable right now, but it wasn't, it just was very hard. It was very hard. It challenges them in a way that they didn't ask to be challenged, because they have to go, you seemed so confident of this. What happened to you that didn't happen to us? What happened? And that even happened once. My father asked me, we were on a family vacation to go watch the University of Utah play Notre Dame. And we were in Chicago and we were in this hotel, and my dad asked me in his hotel room, he said, can I just ask you sincerely, just what happened? Cause you were so in, and then what happened? And I asked him, I said, hey, do you actually want me to say, do you actually want an answer? And he said, yeah, no, I want an answer. And I said, okay, I'm going to say it, but I feel like you're not going to like it. And he goes, no, tell me the answer. And I said, well, I genuinely searched. I thought I would be proven wrong. I thought I would find out that the church is true and that I was stupid to think that it wasn't. But I genuinely went out looking to kind of examine the church from another angle and see if I could learn more about it and learn more about myself and about my faith. And what I found out about myself and about this church, and for me, is that I don't think that it's correct. I think that it's just just like any other religion. I think that it's just crafted from the mind of a man. And like, what a mind to craft something like this and to be so successful and to have it roll across the entire world. But I don't think that it's special or unique or different from any other organization. And yeah, he didn't like that, and he wasn't particularly ready to hear that. There were times early on when I was the only one that were very hard, where I couldn't necessarily keep my mouth shut. Like, I had a really hard time keeping my mouth shut about Proposition 8 happening in California. It was very hard to not talk to my family members and friends about that, because I felt so strongly about how wrong it was and how transparently bigoted it was. And that kind of goes into that territory of like, hey, live and let live, and I'll leave you to yourself if you're not hurting people. But if you're actively doing something that I think is very harmful and hurtful, I'm going to have a hard time not saying something about it. And again, early on, it really felt like I didn't have a lot of support on my side, on my team. With my friends and with my extended family, it felt like it was kind of like me holding down the fort for this other perspective and everybody else. So I learned what to pick my moments, and mostly I just avoided it. But yeah, Proposition 8 wound up being the thing that helped my brother, who wound up doing Mormon Expression, get out of the church, because we had this knockdown, drag out fight on my parents' front lawn till like 3 a.m. We're not throwing fists, but just being harsh with each other. Really
tell
harsh.
us about that.
And it was about Prop 8, and it was Prop 8 was happening. And
so for those who don't know, that's when the Mormon Church actively spent over $40 million plus volunteer effort to try to successfully take same-sex marriage away from a sovereign U.S. state, the state of California. That happened in 2008.
Yeah, they wanted to make it.
They were successful.
Yeah.
And they denied that they spent any money doing it. And then they were shown to have lied about it.
Yeah. They were one of the biggest contributors and one of the biggest, the biggest. Yeah. And my brother was very devoted to the church at the time. And
Adam was.
Yeah, he was very devoted. He had a family in the church and kids, and he was, I remember him telling me things like, if you think that there's not an agenda to keep this going and then to come for the church and to try to take the church down and to destroy our way of life, you're crazy. And I remember saying to him, like, dude, listen to yourself. You're talking about people like they get together in underground bunkers and they roll out a map and they say, first we get gay marriage and next we indoctrinate the children. Like that's not what's happening. It's just people trying to live a life with dignity. It's just people trying to exist. And you're talking about them like they all know each other and they get together and they say, is everyone clear on the plan? Here's the plan, and he goes, they're going to try to take down the temples. They're going to try to say that the temple is discriminatory and they're going to make it so that we can't live the way we live. And I remember telling him on the front lawn, I said, you're a bigot, man. And it breaks my heart, but you've got a bigoted stance on this. And I also told him, I said, you say things that I've heard you say in front of your kids that you don't know if one of your kids is going to be gay. And I don't want one of your kids, if they are gay, hearing that growing up. It's hard for me to stand by. And we were not seeing eye to eye. But this experience that I had with my brother is one of the reasons why I still do what I do on social media, because I witnessed the process of someone's heart changing and someone's mind changing.
So something positive came out of that fight?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did it happen?
And I also witnessed that people always say like, well, you got to try to come in with a really soft touch, but not always. Sometimes what people need is some really blunt, straightforward, this is it. It's going to hurt to hear. It's going to be hard to hear it. I mean, think about like how you get through like a breakup or a divorce. It's like, sometimes what has to happen is the message needs to be hard, because if you go really soft and go, I think we're sort of growing apart, or sometimes what needs to happen is, I'm not in love anymore, something like that hurts. It's painful, but it allows the other person the clarity. And so my brother and I had that fight, and I definitely left thinking, well, that didn't accomplish anything. That was just, all that happened is both of us got I feel bad that I said mean things to my brother. I felt really bad that I called my brother a bigot. I felt really bad that I questioned his parenting. I felt really bad. Well, he comes to me a few months later, and we're on another family trip. We were on a family church history trip. We were going to see the Joseph Smith House in New York, and we were going to go to Palmyra and all this stuff. We're in New York City, and my family all knew that I did my own thing. And I told them I'm going to go see a show by myself, and I'm going to go get a drink at a bar, and they went, okay. And I went off and I went to go get a drink. And my brother texted me and he said, hey, where are you? Where are you getting a drink? And I told him the bar. It was a bar in Times Square. And I was like, and he goes, I'm going to come over and meet you. And I'm thinking in my head, like, oh geez, my brother's going to come over and try to convince me why I'm doing the wrong things with my life and whatever. He comes in, he sits down next to me and he orders a Heineken and he starts talking to me. And I just go, what are you doing? And he just goes, I just wanted to let you know what's been going on in my life the last 4 or 5 months. And he said, ever since we had that conversation, I just haven't been able to get out of my head that you won the argument and that I knew you had won the argument. And I didn't have a good response to anything you were saying. And he goes, so a lot of my anger that night was just me being frustrated that I knew you were right. And he goes, and I don't want to be a bigot. I don't want to be a bad person. And he goes, I have friends who are gay and it breaks my heart that I've been letting them down and that I've been treating them poorly and treating them different. And he's like, and I just don't want to be that person anymore. And he goes, so it's been very hard because I've had to sort of look myself in the mirror and say, who am I? What kind of guy am I? And he goes, so I went to my wife, he went to his wife at the time, told her what he was experiencing. She said, thank God, I feel the exact same way. So she even came to the bar with us and all three of us all of a sudden had this new relationship. Now I wasn't alone in the family. I had teammates and I was like, oh my, it was like one of the best days of my ex-Mormon life was finding out that it felt like the first time I had experienced something that Mormons would call like a miracle. Like it really felt like a person who I never thought would change his mind, coming to me and saying, you helped me change my mind. You helped me see clearly. And I still operate in a way on my podcast and on social media and in content where my message can be blunt sometimes. It can be really direct. And I get a lot of pushback on people who say like, I wish you would try to deliver it softer. And my personal belief is that I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm just trying to be honest and I'm trying to be clear. And I feel like when I try to soften it, I take away the honesty of the message a little bit. I dilute it. I dilute the honesty of the message, and I'm not doing it to hurt your feelings. I'm doing it to try to make it clear. And it might hurt to hear it. It might be hard to be confronted with some of that stuff. My advice to people who it's hard for is push through that feeling, push through the difficulty of that feeling. Be brave enough to confront the pain of having your beliefs examined in a way that is uncomfortable. Be brave enough to keep moving in that direction and see if there's something to it, because my experience outside of the church is typically my best evolutions as a person come with great discomfort and come with a lot of pain. And I don't get anywhere good without pain.
I love it.
Yeah.
Just for those who don't know, his brother, Adam Archer, we've recently this year brought John Larson on the Mormon Stories. We resuscitated the Mormon Expression catalog.
Yeah.
Austin's brother, Adam, who is the Heineken purchaser in the story. It's Adam who ends up succeeding John Larson as the host temporarily on Mormon Expression podcast before Mormon Expression podcast stopped for good. And so Adam, your brother, is a name that's familiar to me because he was John Larson's successor for a little bit of time. So that's cool. Again, shout out to Adam. We mentioned him at the beginning.
Yeah.
So really quickly, like I am blown away. Well, first of all, what he just shared was kind of mind blowing to me. And Carah, you were nodding your head as well. Just because like with Mormon Stories, my strategy has always been be neutral, be faith, affirming, be safe, make sure Mormon Stories feel safe to a believing Orthodox Mormon so that it won't become an echo chamber. So you won't create the backfire effect. Mm-hmm. And so that they'll want to listen. And then maybe the stories will help, the emotion and the compellingness of the stories will help lead them to truth if they're interested in a journey in truth. But what you just said, and even Anthony Magnabosco, our time with him, he's like, always be humble, always be, low key and don't fight, don't create agitation. Like it's a different approach, than what I've been taking, and that what often we argue. And Carah, I'm always, and I don't mean this to like do anything other than to say you're awesome, but I'm always like, Carah, we got to be neutral. We got to be faith affirming. We got to be safe. So I'm just wondering if you
I think the huge
on
difference is somebody that you have a lifelong trust with as a family member is obviously a big difference between a podcaster or somebody else.
Because your brother loved you clearly. Right?
Yeah. And I've had conversations like that when I was in the church with my like non-believing family members where they'll say something. I just want to explain this dynamic in my very like previous, very conservative, very like fringy, like bigoted Mormon mind that I was working in. And sometimes somebody who's an ex-Mormon will say something to you that technically it's a flat out wrong thing, but you still put it in the I'm Mormon, they're not Mormon. It's in the reject pile.
Yeah.
But then you have enough things where you're like, I don't have an argument against that. And you have to start paying attention more to the things you don't actually have good arguments for. And you're like, all right, I'm going to take the ones that were in the trash pile that I immediately rejected as bad ideas. And as a Mormon, I had to sift through those ideas from my non-believing sister would be one of them. And it sounds like that same kind of conversation of like, all right, I actually don't have a good reason to be anti-gay marriage. Like I thought I did. I actually need to examine these ideas a little bit better. And it took my sister saying hard things to me that I had to look at it and examine it and really come to terms with if I believed it, did I believe it? Or did I just believe in a church that believed it? And if I believe in a church that believes it and I don't believe it, I'm just going to be on a diverging path now. Where does that leave me as a Mormon person now? Right. So the more and more you add those things up of what does the church believe? What do I believe about that thing? People are calling me a bigot. You have to, sort those things out. And it takes somebody that you trust and you love, regardless of them calling you a bigot.
Yeah.
To actually be like, all right, I can handle that. That's hard, but I'll examine it. So that's super, super like, somebody was saying that they were at work and an atheist and about to cry at how beautiful that story was because we don't hear stories like that very often.
Well, and I will say the method that you use, John, on this podcast definitely works. And I think that after 16 years of doing this, that the approach that you take to sort of soften the blow of the message, but also make it faith affirming. And I think you've helped. And I know that you've heard from many, many people over the years that you've helped lots of people sort of go through what's a very difficult transition. It's very difficult. And you help them go through it in a way that feels like they're still being honored. They're not being talked down to. They're not being told that they're idiots for thinking what they thought. And so I think that the approach that you take is absolutely a very humane and compassionate approach. And I definitely have my fair share of content that I think is in that space, but also like, I think Donald Trump changed some things for me because it was just like, these people are responding to brute force. They're responding to someone who is delivering a message with a sledgehammer and not given any regard about who he's offending or making it, you know what I mean? And so I was kind of like, well, maybe I can push back with some of that flair and just kind of go, well, if you guys like the
direct speech, I'll give it. Well, let me reframe it just a tiny bit because, okay, Mormon Story Strategy, I think, is proven to be pretty solid.
Yeah.
But when we counsel people about how to speak to believing family and friends, I always say less is more. Don't tell them about the problems. And usually it's to try and preserve their own capital, their own mental health, their own well-being, their own safety in a social structure that can be, frankly, terrible or horrific.
Yeah.
High demand religions and or cults, there can be life-ending consequences to coming out to believing family and friends. So I usually encourage people to err on the side of less is more. Don't tell them details. Just be kind and mousy and quiet and let them figure it out. But don't poop in your nest, I think is what I basically tell them to preserve their own health and well-being in relationships. But I always know in the back of my head that there are people who do want to know the truth, but it's going to take a really direct and candid conversation to get them there.
Yeah.
And that there's a cost to telling everyone less is more, stay quiet, keep it to yourself. And the cost is people like Adam that may have never moved if they hadn't have had that really direct, intense, jarring conversation. So my advice of less is more minimalistic coming out comes at an expense of some people not hearing the things they need to hear to be able to to come to the realization that they ultimately would want to come to.
Yeah.
So that's the sacrifice. And I'm not saying there's a right answer, but there's a sacrifice. There's a cost to what I've been recommending to people that now you're making me reconsider at times. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And in my experience with the methodology that I use is that it happens slowly. What will happen is I will be really direct with someone and they won't like what I'm saying, and they'll kind of push back and go like, I don't like how you're talking to me. It might even get to the point where they say, I can't talk to you anymore. This is like, you're kind of hurting my feelings, you know? And I'll say, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm just trying to answer your questions and just be direct with you. And they might have to walk away. Usually I don't have success in that first conversation, but as long as I've said what I've said and I've said it in a direct way and an honest way, the seed has been planted. And countless times now I've had friends come to me and go, it was that conversation we had. And I went home with that and I sat with that. And I have friends reach out with messages that'll say, I just want to let you know that a few years ago I was kind of, we were talking on Messenger or something. And I was asking you about this thing and I didn't really like how you were talking to me about it. And I got really defensive, and that conversation helped a lot because you were saying things that I had no defense for, but I just, you know, and I'll always tell them, like, I want you to know, I'm not saying this to hurt your feelings, but I'm saying it because you asked, because people will come and they'll be ready. They'll be like, well, what about this? You know, like they've got their research ready. And I'm like, okay, just so you know, if we're going to do this,
like your dad.
Yeah. And I'll be, you know, and so this happened again with my parents. And I think, again, you're right about simple things. Less is more, because sometimes just a simple statement can go a long way. My parents sat me down once and they showed me what I think was a really good talk. They showed me this talk by Elder Uchtdorf, and they said, we want you to see this fantastic talk. And it was the Doubt Your Doubts, Not Your Beliefs talk, where in that talk, he talks about, and it was the first time I'd ever heard someone from the pulpit talk about the fact that we tend to think that people leave the church because they didn't have the moral backbone to handle it. They just wanted to be sinners. But he actually talks at General Conference over the pulpit about the fact that we need to be more compassionate about the fact that people are leaving the church for all kinds of reasons. And it's not just because they were tricked by Satan or anything like, you know. And I remember hearing that and going, oh, this is very progressive of him to say, because the message when I was growing up was, if someone leaves the church, it's because they've lost their way. It's because they're off the path and they've gone off the deep end. So I'm listening to it, but he lists all these different reasons why people might leave that he views as valid. And he leaves off what I think is the most important reason. And I know why he leaves it off, because he can't say this reason over the pulpit, because to acknowledge this reason is to throw a whole wrench into a whole lot of things. But that's why just saying this is really important. So my parents, we finished the talk and they go, what'd you think? And I went, I thought that was very progressive of him to say. And that was really, really cool. And they go, yeah. So, I mean, like, you know, what do you think about that? And I said, well, I think he's leaving off one of the most important reasons why people leave the church. And they went, what's that? I said, they don't believe it. And he just goes, and then they go, well, I mean, but like, maybe they don't believe it because they're opening themselves up to other things. And I said, no, what happens to most people is they're doing a sincere examination of their beliefs and of what they've been taught, and a sincere, objective, unemotional look at it, really just trying to just get down to brass tacks about what it is. And when they look at it that way and they allow themselves to ask questions that they've never allowed themselves to ask before, they determine on their own that they don't actually believe it. And they're willing to be brave enough to acknowledge that they don't believe it in front of their friends and family and take the penalties that come with that. And so, but just saying that to my parents, that the actual most important reason why people leave is they don't believe it. What that does to a believing person is, because first of all, I know, because I've lived this experience, what you think is, how could that possibly be true? If you've gone to all the meetings that I've gone to, and if you've read all the things that I've read, and if you've had all the experiences that I've had, how could it possibly be true that the conclusion that you've come to is that it's not true and that it's not right? That doesn't make sense to me. Something else must have happened. But when you look at a person and just say, I sincerely examined it for myself, I looked at everything, and I sincerely examined how I was being taught, and I allowed myself to examine it completely, not just partially, not just through the lens that the church allows me, but I allowed myself to fully go into all possibilities. And what I came back with was, I don't think that it's true, actually. That alone, just that simple idea is a big seed to plant in someone's head that it's possible for a person of sound mind who, you know, like, look at me, I'm not being taken over by dark spirits. I'm not suddenly a murderer or like a terrible person with no moral character. I'm still the same son that you've known this whole time. The only thing that's changed is I've allowed myself to come up with my own determination about this thing. And so I think that, yeah, I think you're right. Less is more, because there's a lot to be said too about just modeling and demonstrating that you're still you. I remember it was very important for me to like drink around my family on trips and stuff like that, because I just want everyone to see that I'm still me, that I'm going to have a beer while we're watching this thing, and I'm not going to change. I'm not going to become someone different. Like I just want everyone to see that, like, I'm still this person, because just that simple idea that, oh, you're not lost in darkness and miserable, you know, which the ironic thing is I was a very depressed person for my whole 20s, and I had terrible anxiety, and I was miserable, and I, was suicidal and all that stuff. So,
that's going to be part 2.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
I have a theory. I want to drop this theory on you. I've listened to Chandler Roberson, whose episode came out a couple days ago, talking about the anxiety she had on her mission about trying to teach people who she's like, these people know more. They're 56 years old. Why am I trying to teach them about the gospel? Mm. My sister had similar problems on her mission. And it sounds like the way you talked about with the people who are asking you smart philosophical questions, that you're a very introspective person and very self-aware of the things you don't know. And when you put it in those terms, it feels like not everyone can have those harsh brute force conversations with people because they're not super self-aware of when they are crossing the line. So as just an outside person who just met you today, it feels like that you're so self-aware that you know when you can say something and it'll be the right type of jab that not everyone can do, because not everyone is that self-aware to say, I shouldn't serve a mission, or I don't know what the crap I'm talking about. But then when you do know what it's talking about, people take you seriously. That's kind of what I get. And so for the type of content John and I make and the type of message that we give to Mormons who are in these conversations with believing family and friends, yeah, it's like the less is more motto is good, and like you want to be as safe as possible. But if you're the right type of person and you know exactly like what you're doing, sometimes that's where I think the type of brute force can really get somebody to come face to face with, what are your beliefs? Do you really believe that? Let's re-examine it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And it's like, it's also, I mean, I've always been very confident about having sincere conversations with Mormon people, because one thing that I know I have an advantage going into any conversation with them, if they want to go, I want to actually talk to you about this thing, and I don't know what their intent is. I'm like, are you trying to fight, or do you actually want to talk? I don't know. I go in cautious, but I always think I've got an advantage in the conversation because I know both sides and you only know yours. So like, I know all your arguments. You're not like, the likelihood that you're going to say something to me that I haven't heard before and that I haven't already thought through is very low, but there's a much higher likelihood that I'm going to say an idea to you that you haven't ever dared to even consider, Yeah. So
there's also a chance you have a lot more information than they do.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I would be very surprised if they
withheld from Mormons,
right,
about the church's basic history, truth claims.
And so when people want to have a conversation, I'll go, yes, I will. I'll just let you know that I'm going to be straightforward with you, and if you can handle that, then let's do it. But if you think that that's going to be too much for you, then I understand. We don't have to do it. But and then like in comment sections and things like that, and talking to people, it's like I try to never take low blows with people. I try to just be direct and just say, I'm just being straightforward with you. I'm not being rude. I'm not trying to insult you. I'm just telling you what the problems with your position are that I see, And if you want to come back, and because I'm always open and excited for someone to prove me wrong. I'm like, go ahead, like, blow up my position. Like, I would love to be able to go, I once thought this and now I think this because someone just rocked my world with a really great argument.
That's the signal of a strong position.
Yeah.
When you're inviting people to tear it down, and the sign of a weak position is when you're terrified that anybody's going to say anything that's going to
Also, when you
Well,
don't have an
about it.
ego about it, you're like, yeah, like I'll change my mind with new information. Please
Yeah.
present it.
That's how science works. They're like, it works by trying to disprove
Yeah,
the hypothesis,
yeah,
not by seeking all of the evidence that supports the hypothesis, but saying, I'm going to try every way I possibly can to make this not work. And if it keeps working, then it's going to, every time it keeps working, it's going to bolster up my feeling that this is right. You know?
And I just want to read one comment. I think it's from your friend Christopher, who said, Austin and I had those kind of conversations that changed me. I'm one of those old friends. Thank you, Austin.
He was on your podcast.
He was on my podcast,
Yeah.
and he wrote a book about a book called Anti-Mormon Literature. That's great. It's a really great.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Where's it available on? Like
he
through
self-published on Amazon, and it's Christopher Schenefeld is his name. And what a great title, right? Anti-Mormon Literature. Like
That's
it's
great.
a fantastic title, because that is the catch-all term that we're taught growing up, is anything that is critical of this is anti-Mormon literature.
Anything that makes us uncomfortable, anything that's factual, anything that is
anti-Mormon literature.
What we weren't taught.
Yeah. So he just went, I'm just going to cut right to the chase and just say, sure, I'll call it what you will call it. And
sounds like Christopher's going to be our next guest on Mormon Stories podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's great. And yeah, he's one of those people that we talked in college, and he was not super receptive to what I was saying. And I was like, that's fine. And he went on a mission and everything. And then years later
He was at Weber?
Yeah. He said, thanks for that conversation. And I was like, yeah.
That's powerful.
You know, so.
Well, Carah and I are talking off screen about maybe doing this in 2 parts.
Sure.
But before there's one really big question I have.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not going to be able to answer it. It's impossible to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Like, you know, this is like, we're almost at 1,600 probably hours of Mormon Stories podcast episodes in 2021, almost 2022.
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed a lot of Mormons.
Yeah.
And I've interviewed a lot of Mormons that have left Mormonism. It is almost unheard of, like I said maybe an hour ago, for someone to reach that point of like graduating from high school, Orthodox Mormon in Utah, believing, and then choosing to step off that train. But if they do step off the train, usually it's like, oh, well, I started partying and then I fell from grace, but they maintain their beliefs. And even if they went the Jack Mormon route, they either came back to the church at some point and got re-engaged, or they had to go do some processing. But you did something that is almost unheard of, which is, you know, and by the way, I was thinking about my own high school years and even early college years. I had all the same doubts you did. I divided the number of Mormons in the world by the number of people in the world, and got the 0.002%.
Man, this plan's not
and I'm
working
like,
out.
this is a stupid plan.
Yeah.
And I went through the pre-1990 temple ceremony, and I did the throat slitting thing, and I felt horrible. And I disemboweled myself, with my arms, and did Pele El.
Yeah.
And I looked at my brother and I'm like, what in the crap? And but I had all those doubts, but I like, no, I can't get off the train. Like, it's still true. So like, here's the impossible question. How did you do it? How did you have the, and again, this is even asking you to like boast or brag, which again, you're not going to want to do, but aren't you wondering, Carah, like how he did it? Like so many of the people. I see a very
self-confident, self-assured person in front of us at this chair who, from a young age and acting and everything, that you know who you are and you couldn't do anything that felt disingenuous to you. As that's kind of how I see it. Does that resonate?
But almost no Mormon ever makes this choice. So
I'm just a really awesome person.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm a really great guy.
That's why it's a terrible question. But I mean, like, really, aren't you envious? Like, listeners, viewers, aren't you like thinking like, man, I wish I'd figured it out before 2 years of my mission, before college, before deciding my career, before getting married, before having kids. I wish I could have figured it out and acted with integrity and courage, knowing that you'd be facing your parents being disappointed in you, your bishop, all your older siblings, your whole community, all your extended family going, well, look, Austin fell away. Austin is now in the great and spacious building. Austin's a huge disappointment. Almost no Mormon ever makes this choice at age 18 or 19. And you freaking did it. And I just wonder, you're kind of like a unicorn.
You're right. You're absolutely right about it being a very hard question to answer because I don't know the answer. I have this same question all the time about getting sober. I always wonder, why was I able to do it? Why was I able to get it? Why was I able to want it bad enough? In the 3.5 years that I've been sober, I've had friends die of this disease, and I just watched that happen, and I go like, why weren't they able to do it? Why weren't they able to want it? Why they went to the same meetings I went to. They heard the same message I heard. They heard what we needed to do to get sober and to stay healthy. Why was I able to do it and they weren't? And I don't know the answer to that question. And I don't know why I was able to want it bad enough, and why. What I think with the church is, ironically, is I was trying so hard to be the best Mormon in a different way than other people were trying to be. I wanted to know everything. I wanted to really know. And I wanted to approach it like a scientist and go, I'm going to try to disprove this thing so that
that's an act of faith, weirdly.
Yeah, no, totally. I
believe it so much, I'm going to make it face the scrutiny.
Exactly. And that's what happened is I wanted to be the kind of missionary who any counter argument, because what was happening is these kids I was going to school with were asking me questions that I didn't have answers to. And they were saying, what are you going to say if someone asks you this? And I'd go, I don't know. And it was really rocking me because I wanted to be a good missionary and I wanted to serve a really fruitful mission. And I've always loved debate, and I've always loved the process of forming an argument and how you come about feeling secure in an argument. And nothing bothers me more than when I don't have a good argument for something. And when my argument is just because do it because it's good, that doesn't work for me. And so it was ironically the process of trying to become a more well-rounded Mormon person, trying to be the kind of Mormon person who goes, I now have an answer for that because I went out and did a little slumming. I went out and I stepped outside of the church and I went and I tried some things that gave me some new perspective. And now I'm the kind of Mormons that I loved when I would meet them were people who had been through some stuff. When I would meet people who had a story of drug addiction or homelessness, and then they came to the church, those seemed like my kind of people, the kind of people who really knew some stuff. And for them, they really knew the church worked because it saved their life. It gave them new life. It gave them new breath. And so I was a person who just had only ever done this thing. And what I wanted was to have a stronger testimony and a more confident testimony by going through the process of exposing it to the scrutiny. Now, how I was able to want that at 18 years old, why I was able to want that, I can't tell you. And that's one of those mysteries of determinism. Do I make choices or am I just acted upon by forces that I don't control? Because most of my choices are dictated by my emotions and the way that I feel and my desires. And I don't ever consciously desire things. I just have them. I just have desires. So I don't really know how or why I was able to do it. I just know that it was what I was trying to do was to become more confident in my beliefs. And what it wound up doing was taking me in a whole other direction. So
I love it. Well,
yeah.
I guess if I'm going to try and make sense of it, it seems like I valued truth and courage and integrity as a Mormon.
Yeah.
But I also valued obedience.
Yeah.
And I valued faith and even blind faith.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you really, really, really valued truth and integrity and courage over a lot of the other values that maybe I valued community. Maybe I valued being liked. Maybe I valued, again, obedience and faith. Maybe I valued those things so much that I didn't allow myself to get tipped. But it sounds like you valued integrity, authenticity, courage, and maybe empathy for others in a way that made it so you couldn't do anything but follow the truth wherever it led.
Yeah. Because I absolutely value being liked and being accepted by my community and all that stuff. What I couldn't abide was I was just I'm not going to be able to pretend this thing. I'm not going once I started to come to certain realizations, it was heartbreaking because I knew I'm letting everybody down. I'm letting my family down. I'm letting my friends down. I'm letting my community down. All these people who helped raise me, all of the people in my ward, I'm letting all of them down, but I couldn't unknow it. I couldn't pretend like I hadn't thought the thoughts I'd thought. And so, yeah, it was just like authenticity and integrity and honesty became kind of my credo and kind of the thing that I sort of base my life on, which is weird because it's still something I struggle with. It's still something that's very hard for me. Like I in many ways, I'm a person who's incapable of not being myself, and like I'm almost honest to a fault. And then in many ways, like my people-pleasing tendencies, I get into trouble where I can't be direct enough with people, and I skirt around certain things that are uncomfortable because it's someone I care about and I'm trying to preserve a feeling there or something. Or it's, it's someone I want to work with and I don't want to tell them I'm not available for that thing that you want to do. So I say I can do it and I can't, and then I get myself into trouble because I'm spread too thin. I still have to work at honesty, like I think anyone does, but I've had people ask me in live streams that I do, they'll say like, what's your life philosophy? And what I usually come back with is just try to be yourself. First of all, figure out who you are, and then just try to be that person and just try really hard to just honor that person. That's what's going to make you interesting. If you want to be a content creator, that's what's going to make you, someone that people want to gravitate toward, is because you're you, and don't get caught up in trying to sound like someone else, or don't borrow someone else's ideas. Make sure that the ideas that you think are yours for a reason, because you fought for them, because you've tried to, develop your own worldview. And I definitely, for a lot of my life, like the fact that I left the church at 18, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't something I've worn as a badge of honor. I've thought of it for a long time in my adult life and thought, I think it's pretty cool that I did that when no one else was doing it, when I was the only one in my family doing it. And again, I go back to like, I don't know how the hell I got the gumption to do that. I don't know how the hell I got the idea that it would be okay if I did that. But I definitely look back at it and think, even with all of the stuff I went through in my 20s with depression and alcoholism and anxiety and all this stuff, I wouldn't change it. I don't look at that and go, darn, I made the wrong choice. I think that all of that stuff was just a process of me trying to figure out life on my own and say, like, if I'm going to live this life, I have to be the one calling the shots, for better or worse.
Well, one of my heroes in life is a character I don't even know how much they really existed, but it's Sir Thomas More from the movie A Man for All Seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, I watched the film at my BYU theater and film art analysis class as a sophomore, I think, at BYU.
Yeah.
But it's this member of the court of King Henry VIII's court, who King Henry VIII is trying to divorce his wife, but he wants church or social approval to be able to make this really harsh change. And so he tries to get his friend, who's super well respected, Sir Thomas More, to endorse his change. But Sir Thomas More is also a man of faith and a man of principle who doesn't feel comfortable endorsing, the getting rid of your wife, but he also doesn't want to lie and misrepresent things and cave to the pressure of the king.
Yeah.
And he has integrity, and he ends up paying a big price for it. And so I really value integrity, and I conceive of your story, this part one of your story, as a story of integrity, and it's very inspiring to me.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's nice of you to say.
Yeah. And I think it's a great model for other people. Figure out who you are and then be that person, and try not to be anything else.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, I think we should do this interview in two parts. And the main reason why is because I like the idea of the first one being about your faith journey.
Yeah.
And having the SEO and the title around that. And then part two being about your journey with alcohol and alcoholism.
Fantastic.
And having the SEO be around that.
Yep.
So if it's okay, what I'm going to do is thank all our live stream listeners for being a part of this. Thanks all our listeners for listening. This has been amazing. Carah, I want to thank you for joining us. It's always lovely to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. This was really, really fun. Really vibing with a lot of your story. I loved every part of it. Super interesting.
Yeah. And so also though, part 2 isn't just about alcoholism. Like it's about your journey trying to become that actor, trying to be a public figure, social media figure or actor or performer.
Yeah.
And how you hit rock bottom, maybe in many ways, trying to figure that out. And how you both became an alcoholic, conquered alcoholism, and now you're kind of starting to live your dream as a social media influencer, actor, performer. And so it'll inspire people in 2 ways: how to overcome an addiction, but also how to stick with your dream. And so I guess what I'm saying to listeners and viewers is, don't go away. Stay tuned. We're coming right back for part 2 with Austin Archer, world famous TikToker, 1 million followers, podcaster, actor extraordinaire. But part 2, I think, might even be more inspiring and compelling than part 1.
Yeah.
No, I think
That's when it gets good.
break. They should go check out all of your TikToks if they haven't already.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, I want to know more about this guy. Take a break, go to the bathroom, get yourself a snack,
Uh-huh.
go scroll through Austin's TikTok. Give your handle one more time. What is
Your pal _Austin.
That's
Go
TikTok.
peruse that
Yeah.
on
And
TikTok.
Instagram.
Everything, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Yeah.
And so people can check that out. And then your podcast is called?
It's called People Pleaser with Austin Archer, because I'm a big people pleaser. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
What is that on a platform or?
It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff,
Okay.
so yeah.
And any other vehicles for you or products or offerings or websites or channels?
I'm on YouTube as well. Well, they can find my music too. They can listen to my music on Spotify and Apple Music.
Under what?
Bandcamp.
No. What name?
Under what? Oh, it's just Austin Archer.
Okay.
So Austin Archer is the music.
What type of genre?
It's like singer-songwritery, folk rock stuff.
Okay.
But it kind of, one of the things that I do as a musician is like, I make albums where like every song is a different genre and stuff. So I've even had people tell me that. They go, "You'd do better if you would just commit to a genre." And I'm like, yeah, it's not as fun for me. I like flipping around.
We should have had you bring your guitar and play some songs for us, but we.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so Spotify, they can check out there as Austin.
Spotify, yep.
All
Austin
right.
Archer.
All right. Well, thank you so much for part 1. Thank you, Carah. Thank you, listeners and viewers. And don't go away. Join us for part 2 in just a little bit. Or if you're listening asynchronously, just jump right back on part 2, because we're going to have another amazing part 2 with Austin Archer. Thanks again, Austin.
Oh, thanks. This was so much fun.
All right. Thanks, Carah.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.